Right in the middle of my son's funeral, with incense still thick in the air and the wreaths not yet wilted, my daughter-in-law Brianna looked me straight in the eye and said coldly, "Tomorrow you need to get out of this house. This isn't your place anymore." In front of relatives and guests, I swallowed my tears, bit my lip, and chose silence. I didn't want to turn my only son's farewell into a humiliating argument. I only wanted Nathan to rest in peace, at least on his final day. Yet at the will reading afterward, Brianna smirked and sneered, "Hope you enjoy being homeless. Because you're not getting anything." But the moment the lawyer opened the envelope was when karma caught up with her. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Genevieve Hartley, 68 years old, an American mother who's known a lot of loss, but I never imagined grief would hit this hard. My husband died more than 10 years ago from lung cancer, leaving me and our only son, Nathan. After he passed, I sold our old house in the Dallas, Texas suburbs and put $40,000 toward the down payment to help Nathan and his wife, Brianna, buy the home we lived in. Nathan said then, "Mom, think of it as a boost. When you want a smaller place later, I'll help." I trusted my son. And honestly, I didn't worry much about paperwork. When I moved in with them, I tried my best not to be a burden. I cooked dinner, worked in the yard, and picked up my grandchild from school. I cleaned, covered small household expenses, and saw it as my way to keep the family close. But it all became an excuse for Brianna to find my weaknesses and quietly turn me into an outsider in the very house I helped build. Standing before my son's casket that day, my heart hurt so much I thought I might collapse. Nathan died suddenly of a heart attack at 46, with so many plans unfinished. I wanted to pour all my strength into grieving my son and sending him off in peace. Instead of a family's embrace, I got a cold sentence from my own daughter-in-law. Brianna's words cut straight through me, shattering any illusion that I could rely on this family in my old age. I remember every detail. As guests left, the scent of funeral flowers still filled the living room. Used tissues, wet with Brianna's staged tears, were on the table. She wiped her eyes skillfully, always facing the crowd for sympathy, but once no one was watching, her gaze was so cold it made me shiver. I looked again at the wreaths from my late husband's relatives, sent as gestures of support. I knew if they heard what Brianna had just said, they'd be furious. But I kept quiet. I bit my lip until it bled to preserve the last bit of dignity for the family. I wouldn't turn my son's farewell into an open display of hatred. I went upstairs to the small room, Nathan once told me. "Stay as long as you like, Mom. Treat it as your home." I sat on the edge of the bed, tears falling, yet my mind oddly clear. I opened the drawer and took out the small silver key Nathan had given me a few weeks before he died. He'd only said, "Keep this, don't tell anyone. You'll understand later." I'd wondered, but didn't ask. And now, after hearing Brianna throw me out, I began to realize this key was my only hope. I didn't sleep that night. I packed my things into 4 large suitcases and 2 boxes. Each time I folded a shirt, I remembered all the laundry I'd done for the family without a single thank you. Every time I looked at Nathan's bright smile in a photo, my heart broke all over again. I wrapped the remaining pictures in cloth and whispered, "Son, I won't let anyone smear what I've done for you or the love I have for you." Brianna didn't come to see if I needed anything or help me pack. Instead, at exactly 10 p.m., she stood in the doorway, arms crossed, tapping her nails on the frame, and said with contempt, "Don't expect me to change my mind by 10 a.m. Tomorrow, I want you gone. I've put up with you long enough." I looked her in the eye and said nothing. I just nodded. For the first time in my life, I saw such brazen contempt, and for the first time, I resolved never to let anyone trample my dignity again. I left that house before dawn. I took only 4 suitcases in the trunk, a box on the back seat, and Nathan's silver key in my coat pocket. I drove out of the quiet neighborhood while everyone slept. No one knew the woman who'd cared for so many of their children was slipping away like a homeless stranger. I stopped at a roadside motel where a neon vacancy sign threw a cold light over the parking lot. The room was small, smelled of bleach, and the sheets were wrinkled, but I knew this was only temporary. From my purse, I opened the envelope Nathan had bundled with the key. Inside was attorney Harold Pierce's business card and a handwritten note. "Mom, if I'm gone one day, go see Mr. Harold. I've arranged everything." I cried again, but not only from pain. They were a mother's tears on realizing her son had seen it all coming. Nathan knew his wife's true nature and quietly laid out a path for me to survive. I sat by the motel window watching headlights streak past on the highway. A small fire lit in my chest. I wasn't a trembling mother waiting to be thrown out anymore. I was the one holding the key. And I knew the real game had only just begun. The next morning, I drove back to the funeral home where Brianna had arranged everything. Nathan's service was large. White flowers blanketed the room, hymns played steady, and hundreds of well-dressed guests filed in. Everyone praised how solemn and well-organized it was, looking at Brianna with sympathy, seeing her as the young widow who'd lost her husband. I stood off to the side, feeling like a faint shadow at my own son's farewell. I noticed every detail, enlarged photos of Nathan on the walls from childhood to graduation, then the wedding to Brianna, then family vacations. But not a single recent photo of Nathan with me. The pictures I remembered in the living room, me hugging Nathan at his college graduation, the 2 of us at Thanksgiving with relatives were gone. In their place were a happy family of 3 shots: Nathan, Brianna, and my grandchild. I stood still, as if erased from my own son's memories. Brianna entered in a long black dress, makeup flawless but seemingly blurred by tears. Her sobs were loud enough for everyone to hear. Whenever someone came to comfort her, she clung to them and cried harder, making people believe grief was crushing her soul. Outsiders would think she was a devoted, faithful widow. But I knew those tears weren't for Nathan. I still remembered the cold look the night before, the contempt in her voice as she threw me out. A few hours apart, yet the images were impossibly different. One Brianna in public, the grieving wife, poster child for loyalty. Another Brianna behind closed doors, ice-cold, unafraid to toss out a mother who just lost her son. I walked the hallway, trying to fulfill my duties as the bereaved mother. I greeted Nathan's old friends, neighbors, and co-workers from his architecture firm. They offered the usual comfort. "Life is so unfair. He was so young. You have to stay strong." I nodded and managed weak smiles. But deep down, I felt like I was playing a different role. The quiet, patient mother, while the main stage belonged to Brianna. What made my throat tighten was standing in the receiving line when I heard Brianna whisper to her brother Trent behind a wall of white flowers. Her voice was low, but I heard it clearly. "The life insurance will cover the debt for 2 years. After that, I can manage." And the old woman, a short, harsh laugh then, "We'll get the hint. I'm not obligated to support anyone else." I froze. My hands shook, and my heart pounded like it would burst. For a moment, I felt like a throwaway, a weight to be dumped. In the middle of the funeral, with my son not yet buried, Brianna was calculating money and cutting me out of her life. No more feigned sympathy, no more family unity. The mask slipped in a few sentences. I gripped my purse to hide my trembling hands. I told myself not to make a scene. Not here. Not now. Nathan deserved a dignified farewell, not his mother and wife tearing each other apart in front of everyone. I lifted my head, swallowed the lump in my throat, stepped out of the row of chairs, and quietly found a seat off to the side. Under the funeral home's soft yellow lights, I watched Brianna step up and read a few remembrance lines in a trembling voice. She spoke about a wonderful husband, about future plans cut short, and a pain that won't fade. Guests teared up, patted each other's shoulders, some even praised her strength. I watched, feeling a strange mix: pain, anger, and calm. Calm because only I understood how fake it was, and calm because in my purse I had Nathan's key, proof he wasn't as blind as people thought. The service ended with hugs and "take care of yourself." I caught pitying looks from some of my late husband's relatives, as if I were just an old, lonely mother living on my daughter-in-law's goodwill. They didn't know she'd just taken my home. I forced a smile, thanked them, and left quickly before tears returned. Leaving the room, I saw Brianna in the hallway with Trent. They stood close, whispering, glancing my way. When she noticed me, Brianna pretended to wipe her eyes and leaned on her brother's shoulder. Trent patted her and smirked. In that instant, I understood more clearly than ever. They saw me as a cost, an obstacle to keeping the house and the insurance money. I stepped outside and took a deep breath. The late afternoon sky was gloomy, with a March chill. I pulled my coat tight, hands still closed around the key in my crease pocket. The cold outside was nothing compared to the cold inside me, but in that deepest sorrow, I felt a glimmer of light. I knew I no longer had a place in this family, at least not in Brianna's eyes. But I also knew Nathan hadn't abandoned me. He'd prepared something for me, and this key was proof. That night, I didn't go home, the house I thought would be my final place. I drove straight to the small highway motel I'd rented. Sitting on the worn bedspread, I replayed Brianna's whisper. "The insurance will cover the debt. The old woman will get the hint." The words kept looping like a blade. I cried, but not just from loss. It was humiliation, being despised while my son wasn't even in the ground yet. When the tears ran out, I sat up straight and faced the foggy mirror on the wall. I whispered, "Son, I won't let them trample me like this. You wanted me strong, and I will be." I touched the pocket where the key rested. In that moment, I knew. The counterattack would come, and when it did, I wouldn't be the weak old mother they imagined. 2 days after the funeral, my phone rang. Brianna's name lit up the screen. I hesitated, then answered, already certain nothing good would follow. Sure enough, her voice oozed false sweetness. "Genevieve, can you come by the house? I have a few of Nathan's things, keepsakes, that I think you should have." Hearing keepsakes, my chest tightened. I thought of watches Nathan wore or old photo albums he kept in his nightstand. Suspicious, but I agreed, partly to hold on to something of my son, partly because I knew I'd be facing Brianna many more times. When I arrived, the house looked exactly as it did after the funeral. White flowers drooped in vases, and the air was heavy with dampness and leftover candle scent. It had once been Nathan's warm home. Now it felt like a cold stage. Brianna opened the door, face expressionless, no tears left. "Come in," she said, turning. "Straight to the living room." I paused at the threshold, then followed. The oak table in the center was cleared, except for a stack of papers and a pen. There wasn't a single keepsake of my son. I knew instantly. This wasn't about returning mementos. It was a trap. Brianna sat and pointed at the stack. "This is an agreement. If you sign, there won't be any legal disputes over the house. I want things clear. The house is in Nathan's name, which means it's mine. You need to confirm you're leaving voluntarily. No claims, no demands. That way, everything stays smooth." I stared at the pages. The language was icy, carefully drafted, even leaving a spot for notarization later. I felt both pain and anger. I knew I had sold my own house to put in $40,000, so Nathan could buy this one, yet here I was being treated like a stranger, told to sign a promise not to cause trouble. I looked up, my voice trembling slightly. Brianna, I just lost my son. I haven't even gathered my thoughts. How can you ask me to sign this? She showed no sympathy. Because I don't want problems. I'm young, I need to move on. I can't keep dragging an old woman like you around my house. Nathan wouldn't want that either. Her words felt like a blade twisting into my heart. But right then, an idea flashed. I suddenly remembered the mini voice recorder in my purse, the one I used to save lectures when I was still teaching. There was a gap under this oak table, just enough to hide it. I took a deep breath and nodded. Fine. Hand me the pen. I pretended to tremble as I held it. My fingers slipped slightly, and I intentionally made a small mistake in my signature. To anyone else, I looked panicked, but I knew this. A wrong signature would invalidate the document. Across from me, Brianna's face relaxed, convinced she'd won. See? This will make things easier for everyone, she said, satisfied. While she was busy putting the papers away, I smoothly bent down to pick up a dropped handkerchief and, at the same time, attached the recorder under the table. I switched it to auto, its tiny light blinking a faint green. My heart pounded, but I kept the same weary, compliant expression. All done, I'll go now, I said, standing up, my voice unsteady. Brianna gave a thin smile, folding her arms on the chair. Yes, you should go. I'm tired of supporting someone who can't do anything. She's a parasite and belongs on the street. I'm not a charity to carry extra weight. I turned away, hiding the tear rolling down my cheek, but inside me, something else flared clarity and resolve. The mini recorder had captured every cruel word. That was my first piece of evidence, and I would guard it like a treasure. Leaving the house, I drew a deep breath on the porch. The late March sky was gray, the wind strong enough to make the front yard trees sway. I pulled my coat tight and hurried to the car. When the door slammed shut, I exhaled long, like I'd just escaped a predator's den. I drove back to the motel, heavy-hearted but with a new fire lit inside me. I knew I had nothing left to lose, but I had something Brianna couldn't imagine the truth, and I would let that truth be the rope that binds her. That night, I sat alone in the small room. I took out the recorder and hit play. Brianna's voice rang out clear in the stillness. She's a parasite and belongs on the street. I listened 3 times, each time feeling both hurt and more determined. I whispered to myself, Nathan, did you hear that? Your wife's true face is showing, but I won't keep crying. I will stand up, and I'll let the world know you were right to trust me. I put the recorder in the drawer and locked it. The first piece of evidence was in my hands. And I knew this was only the beginning of my counterattack. I returned to the roadside motel room late at night. The red neon vacancy sign outside flickered a cold light through the thin curtain. Inside, the harsh bleach smell clung to the faded sheets, stinging my nose. The small room was bare. A single yellow bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a dim, dreary glow. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching my bag to my chest. Brianna's words from that afternoon still pounded in my head. She's a parasite and belongs on the street. I didn't need to replay the recording. Every syllable felt carved into my bones. Each time I remembered, it hurt and also sparked a flame. It wasn't just an insult, it was a cold confirmation that she considered me disposable. I leaned back against the wall, eyes half closed. Semi-trucks thundered along the highway outside, mixing with the old air conditioner's rattling hum. In that moment I told myself, I lost my husband, and now my son, but I will not lose my dignity too. Nathan, my only child, saw all of this coming. Proof of that was the silver key and the note he left me, and I knew that was my only path out of Brianna's trap. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the thin curtain, painting blotchy streaks across the mildewed wall. I woke from a nearly sleepless night. My body was exhausted, but my mind was strangely clear. I washed my face with icy water from a rusty tap, then made instant coffee from the vending machine in the lobby. It burned bitter in my throat, but at least it woke me up. I sat at the wobbly wooden table and took out the envelope from Nathan. His familiar handwriting on the note made my hands shake. "Mom, please go see Mr. Harold Pierce." Below were the phone number and the law office address. I traced the letters as if touching Nathan's hand. I sat still the entire morning, a finger resting on the numbers. I didn't call yet, partly because I needed to calm down, and partly because I knew this call would open a new chapter, and once it began, there'd be no going back. I had to be ready, not a weeping, fragile mother, but a woman, prepared to fight for the right to exist. By late afternoon, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered, and a steady, low male voice said, "Hello, I'm Harold Pierce, the attorney handling Nathan Hartley's legal matters. First, please accept my condolences for your loss." I gripped the phone, my throat tight. After a moment, I answered, "Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Nathan, my son mentioned you. He trusted you." Harold's voice softened, a steadying anchor. "Yes, Nathan worked with me for some time. Before he passed, he left certain documents and instructed me to contact you. We should set up a meeting to clarify issues related to an addendum to the will. Could you come to my office next Tuesday at 2 p.m.? I nodded, knowing he couldn't see me. "Yes, I'll be there. Thank you." When the call ended, I set the phone down and stared ahead. Fear fluttered in my chest, but so did hope. Nathan hadn't abandoned me. My son had prepared something, left me a path Brianna never expected. I looked up at the smoke-stained ceiling, and it suddenly seemed brighter, as if Nathan's eyes were watching over me. That night, I opened an old notebook and began to write, like speaking to my son. "Nathan, today I got a call from Attorney Pierce. You prepared more for me than I ever imagined. I promise I won't let you down. I'll keep my dignity, and I'll let the world see you were right to believe in me." I folded the notebook and tucked it under my pillow. Outside, cars tore down the highway like racing heartbeats. I knew the day of reckoning was close. 2 days later, my phone rang again. This time, Brianna's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice was sugary and strained. "Genevieve, I just want to make sure you're not planning to make trouble for me. We're still family, right? I think you should let things be. Staying quiet is best for everyone. Otherwise, no one will believe you anyway." I drew a long breath, holding back anger. "Brianna, I don't want drama. I only want Nathan to rest in peace. But remember this, I won't let anyone walk over me ever again." A short, mocking laugh crackled through the line. "And what do you think you can do? No one's on your side. People will just see a bitter old woman. You should disappear like you should have from the start." I closed my eyes and said nothing. I let her finish and quietly hung up. Then I opened the drawer and looked at the recorder resting inside. I knew that if needed, I had what I needed to protect myself. In the days that followed, I lived hour by hour. Each morning I put on my old coat and went out for a hot coffee from the convenience store near the motel. I sat in the corner and watched sunlight move across the room. My shaking eased, replaced by steady anticipation. I knew that by next Tuesday everything would be different. In those quiet moments, I thought of Brianna. She was surely scheming, surely relieved she thought she'd forced me to sign. She didn't know the signature was invalid. She didn't know her cruel words were recorded. And most of all, she had no idea what Nathan had left for me. I looked at the silver key in my hand and squeezed it gently. A new game had begun, and this time I wouldn't be the passive one. The meeting with Attorney Harold Pierce came faster than I expected. All that morning my heart thudded like a drum. I wore a neat old navy dress and a gray cardigan. I wanted to look put together, not to show off, but to make sure Brianna saw I was still Genevieve Hartley, a woman with dignity, not the parasite she called me. The law office was in a 3-story red brick building downtown. When I arrived, the clock read 1:45. I sat in my car a few minutes, breathing deeply to steady myself. Through the window, I saw a silver BMW pull in. It was easy to recognize the woman who stepped out. Brianna, in a fitted black dress, blonde hair neatly curled. Next to her was Trent, her brother, in a crisp suit. I got out. Brianna's eyes met mine and briefly flickered, then hardened. She turned away without a hello. Trent leaned in to whisper to her, and they went inside quickly. I followed with my head high and my hands tight on my purse strap. The receptionist smiled and led us to a carpeted waiting room. It was still and quiet except for the ticking clock. Brianna sat across from me, legs crossed, fists tight on her designer bag. Every time she glanced up, her eyes slashed at me like knives. I stayed calm and even gave a faint smile, which only irritated her more. At exactly 2 p.m., the door opened and Harold Pierce walked in. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, tall and lean, with kind eyes behind silver frames. He greeted each of us, his voice low and steady. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time, but Nathan left very specific wishes. I'll read the will exactly as written." We entered his office, a wide room with a polished mahogany desk and shelves full of files. I sat across from Brianna and Trent, so tense I could barely breathe. Harold began reading. The first part was what I expected. The house, the car, retirement accounts, and the life insurance, everything left to Brianna. She nodded repeatedly, lips curving into a smug smile. Each time Harold said assets left to the wife, she shot me a look full of challenge, as if to say, "See, you're nothing." I sat with my hands folded, silent. I wasn't reacting. I knew the surprise hadn't come yet. Then Harold paused. His tone shifted, slower. However, 3 months before he passed, Nathan added an addendum to the will. I'll read it word for word. The air changed. Brianna stopped nodding and leaned forward, eyes locked on the papers. Trent lowered his pen and stared. My breath grew heavy. Harold continued, quote, "I, Nathan Hartley, leave the entire contents of Safe Deposit Box K412 at First National Bank, along with all related documents and accounts inside, to my mother Genevieve Hartley. Full and exclusive ownership." A dead quiet moment. I could hear my own heartbeat. Brianna slammed her hand on the table. "What? No way. Nathan never mentioned any safe deposit box." Mr. Harold calmly looked up. "Ma'am, I personally witnessed him sign this addendum. He was fully competent. I have medical verification attached." "Nothing improper here." Trent cut in, voice tight. "We demand verification. This could be forged." The attorney didn't flinch. "You're entitled to request it, but remember, this document is lawful and already filed with the county court. If you want to contest it, the process will be lengthy and the outcome uncertain. I advise respecting the decedent's wishes." Brianna's face flushed. She bit her lip. I saw her hand tremble, though she tried to stay composed. She turned to me, eyes blazing. "You knew about this, didn't you?" "You put Nathan up to it." I shook my head, speaking slowly. "No. I'm as surprised as you are. Nathan never told me about a safe deposit box. But maybe my son knew better than anyone that his mother needed protection." Brianna let out a short, brittle laugh. Trent placed a hand on her shoulder, whispered something, and both fell silent. "Mister." Harold took out a sealed envelope and handed it to me. "These are the box key and the authorization. The bank will proceed once they have the death certificate." "You have full access to the contents." I took it, my hand heavy yet oddly warm. Inside, I told Nathan, "Son, I understand now. You never abandon me." Brianna's eyes locked on the envelope like she might snatch it. I saw fear there, not just anger. Maybe she knew the box held more than money. Maybe instinct made her panic, because she understood Nathan had seen her true nature. The meeting ended tight as a drawn wire. Brianna shot to her feet, her chair scraping back. With a bang, she yanked Trent's arm and stormed out. But before leaving, she turned, stared me down, and said each word, "Don't think you've won. I won't let this go." The door slammed. Only Harold and I remained. He looked at me with a faint smile. "Mrs. Genevieve, your son was very thorough. He planned for every scenario. Trust that he wanted you protected." I nodded, my throat tight. Tears welled up, but this time they weren't from despair. They were the tears of new strength and faith. Leaving the office, I stepped into the street. The late afternoon was chilly, wind tugging my cardigan. I held the envelope close and walked slowly. People rushed by, traffic flowed, yet I felt oddly comforted. In all this loss, I still had something precious: my son's quiet protection. And now it was the flame guiding me through whatever came with Brianna. I knew this was only the beginning. A small bomb had gone off, and the aftershocks would last. Brianna wouldn't sit still, but I wasn't the compliant mother anymore. I had evidence, a silver key, and most importantly, a reason to fight. Nathan, my son, had given me that faith, and I swore I wouldn't waste it. 3 days after the will reading, I was at First National Bank on a cold morning. The sky was slate gray, the April wind damp and gusty, whipping my hair. I wore a dark brown heavy coat, the envelope and silver key from Mr. Harold Pierce in hand. My heart pounded, not from fear, but because I knew the truth Nathan had prepared for me lay beyond that steel door. The bank was busy, heels tapping on the marble floor. I went to the desk and showed my documents. The banker, a middle-aged woman named Peterson, looked up with kind sympathy. "Are you Mrs. Genevieve Hartley? We were expecting you." "Please follow me." I nodded and followed her through several security doors. We stopped at a thick gray door with an electronic lock. Miss Peterson scanned her card and used a master key. My hands shook as I pulled the silver key from my pocket and turned the second lock. A click. The door swung open, and we stepped into a large room under fluorescent light. Box K412 sat on the third rack, long and heavy. I needed both hands to pull it. When the cold metal box settled on the table, I hesitated. "Miss." Peterson offered a small smile. "Take as much time as you need. I'll wait outside." The door closed. It was just me and the box. I sat, took a deep breath, and turned the key. Inside, the first thing I saw was a brown envelope labeled, "For Mom." I opened it with shaking hands. Nathan's voice seemed to speak as I read, "Mom, if you're holding this, the thing I feared has happened. I'm sorry I can't protect you by being there, but I've prepared so you'll never be abandoned. You deserve a peaceful life. No one has the right to throw you out on the street." I cried. Tears fell onto the letter, blurring the lines. I quickly wiped them away. I couldn't lose a single word he left me. Beneath the letter was a thick stack of documents, organized neatly. I opened them: bank statements, investment agreements, stock sheets. It took a few seconds to understand the numbers: nearly $200,000, all in my name. Nathan had taken the $40,000 I gave years ago, invested over time, and turned it into this. And there was more. In the corner sat a separate file marked in red: documentation. I opened it and almost lost my breath. Inside were printed emails, text messages, even screenshots. The first line hit like a slap. "She just needs to hurry up and die and leave the pension. I'll find a legal way to get it." That text came from Brianna's number to Trent's more than a year ago. I shook, but kept reading. There were sections where Brianna discussed manipulating Nathan, making him believe I was a burden, pushing me to pay more even though the mortgage came straight from his salary. there were luxury. Purchase receipts matching the days she claimed she couldn't afford groceries. Each page twisted my stomach pain, and a rising anger. Nathan had known. He'd seen it all, and quietly gathered proof so one day I could protect myself. At the bottom was an old family photo, me and Nathan on his college graduation day, his face bright with pride. On the back he'd written, "Mom, you're the reason I got here. Never forget that." I pressed the photo to my chest, choked up. For years I'd thought my son had been pulled away by his wife's control. But deep down, Nathan had always stood with me. He just prepared for the worst. When I left the bank, the envelope and files were secure in my purse. Miss Peterson walked me out, eyes gentle. "Mrs. Hartley, I met Nathan a few times when he came in. He always mentioned you. I believe he loved you more than you know." I nodded, eyes wet, and whispered thanks. Outside, the midday light made me squint. The wind was cold, but I felt warm inside. On the drive back to the motel, my phone rang. Brianna. For a second I wanted to ignore it, but I answered. Her voice was sickly sweet. "Genevieve, are you busy today? I think maybe we should sit down and talk about everything. I don't want the family to fall apart. I made roast chicken your favorite." I tightened my grip on the wheel and gave a thin smile. "Sure. I'll come." I knew. She wasn't inviting me out of kindness. She'd heard about the box. Now she wanted to pry out whatever Nathan left. But this time, I wasn't coming empty-handed. I had truth, evidence, money. I had my son's quiet protection. That meeting would be our first face-off since the will reading. And this time, I wouldn't just defend. I'd test her, so she'd see I was no longer the compliant mother-in-law. I drove slowly, sunlight flashing off the windshield, my lips pressed tight. Inside, I spoke to Nathan. "Thank you, son. I found my weapon, and I'll use it at the right moment so you can rest, and the truth can see daylight." The lunch date with Brianna fell on a clear noon, sunlight slicing through my windshield so bright I had to pull the visor down. I drove my old car, emotions roiling. From the moment I left the bank, I knew her invitation wasn't about family, it was just another trap, but this time, I was ready. Brianna's house sat on a quiet suburban street. It was still the place I'd lived for 2 years, yet it now felt unsettlingly foreign. When I parked, the door opened. Brianna stood there in a pristine white dress, smiling warmly as if nothing had ever happened. "Genevieve, you're here. I'm really glad," she chirped, honey-sweet voice, eyes cold as ice. I nodded slightly, carrying a small bag. Inside was the gift I'd chosen on purpose, a framed photo of Nathan on his graduation day. I was sure Brianna had never seen it, because back then she hadn't yet entered my son's life. Inside, I hesitated. The dining room gleamed. A white cloth covered the table, a neat vase of red roses in the center. Fine, gold-rimmed china was set like a banquet. Roast chicken, salad, white wine, everything staged perfectly, like props for a performance. "Please sit, Mom," Brianna said, pulling out a chair like the devoted daughter-in-law. If I hadn't known her true face, I might have believed she wanted to make peace. I set the gift bag on the table and smiled. "I brought you something small, thought you should have it." Brianna tore the wrapping open. Seeing Nathan in his cap and gown, face glowing with pride, her expression softened only for a moment. The fake smile snapped back into place. "Beautiful picture." "Thank you, Mom," she said, setting the frame aside. I noticed she didn't handle it gently, just brushed it off like a prop she didn't need. Saturday. Brianna poured wine and handed me a glass. "To Nathan," she said, with staged emotion. I clinked lightly and took a small sip. Inside, I reminded myself, stay calm, observe, don't rush. Lunch slid by in small talk. Brianna talked about repairs the house needed and rising expenses. I knew she was setting the stage. I stayed quiet and let her tangle herself in her own sugary web. Finally, after a few fluffy stories, Brianna set down her utensils, propped her chin on her hand, and smirked. Genevieve, I know you went to the bank. I'm not stupid. So, what did you find in the box? I looked up, playing dumb. Oh, nothing much. Just a few old photos, some keepsakes. Nathan was sentimental like that. Brianna narrowed her eyes. I saw suspicion flicker, then she gave a thin smile. Really? I think there must be something more valuable. Nathan wouldn't keep a whole safe deposit box for a few pictures. I shrugged, feigning indifference. Meanwhile, my hand quietly placed a black pen on the table next to the water glass. It wasn't a normal pen, it was the mini recorder I'd bought after the first time I captured her cruel words. A light press at the top, and the entire conversation would be saved. And I had just pressed it. Brianna poured herself more wine, took a long sip, then lowered her voice. Genevieve, we're both adults. I'll be blunt. If you cooperate, I'll give you a cut. We both know Nathan left something, and it's better for everyone if we make a private deal. You'll have money to rent a place, and I won't have to drag this into court. Win-win. I sat still, looking straight into those glossy, fake eyes. For a moment, I saw the real face peeking out from under the makeup. That offer wasn't just greed, it was open contempt. I nodded slightly, my voice shaky, pretending to think. You really believe Nathan would want me to hide what he left? Brianna jumped in immediately. Don't bring up Nathan. He's dead. We have to be practical. If you're smart, you'll work with me. If not, you'll get nothing but a few meaningless photos. I bit my lip, bent to pick up my napkin, and hid a bitter smile. In my pocket, the pen recorder was capturing everything. If you cooperate, I'll give you a cut, was the second noose, tightening around Brianna's neck. Lunch dragged on a few more minutes under a quiet tension. Brianna kept painting a picture of mutual cooperation, and I just nodded, letting her talk. Now and then, I tossed in a clueless line, playing the out-of-touch mother-in-law who's easy to steer. I knew the more she thought she was winning, the more she'd reveal herself. When the meal ended, Brianna walked me to the door, still smiling. I hope you'll think this over seriously. I don't want tension with you. Family needs to stick together. I gripped her hand and looked her in the eye. Exactly. Family needs to stick together. And don't worry, I won't forget what you said today. I turned and left, my pocket heavy with the pen recorder. In my head, Brianna's syrupy but calculating voice echoed. If you cooperate, I'll give you a cut. Another piece of evidence, another puzzle piece in the picture I was quietly assembling. When the door closed behind me, I stepped into the sunlight, the breeze brushing my cheek. I took a deep breath. With every step now, I didn't feel alone. I had Nathan behind me, the truth in hand, and bit by bit, I was turning the table. After that staged lunch, I didn't rush to distance myself from Brianna. I knew to corner her, I needed one more face-to-face, one sharp blow to knock off the mask. I chose 3 days later, when Brianna called first, trying to sound warm. Genevieve, could you stop by the house? I want to show you some papers. Nathan left. Maybe we'll understand each other better. Her voice was sugary, but I could smell the scheme. I agreed immediately. I had my own plan. Brianna's living room gleamed, fresh flowers on the table, leather sofas polished. She wore a red dress, makeup carefully done like she was prepping for a high-profile meeting. I sat, set my purse beside me, folded my hands, and kept my expression calm. Thank you for coming, Brianna began with a half-smile. I think we need transparency to avoid misunderstandings. I don't want family tension. I waited a few seconds, then pulled a printed screenshot from my pocket. I set it gently on the table and slid it toward her. Brianna's eyes shifted from curious to stunned as she read the clear words, "Parasite." If Nathan dies, I'm turning her room into a home gym like I promised. The text was sent from her phone to Trent. Her face went pale, her lips quivered. This isn't mine. Someone faked it. I smirked slightly, my tone even. Really? Because I have the originals on the drive. Nathan kept timestamps, phone numbers, and images. Who do you think a court will believe? An elderly mother with no reason to fabricate, or a widow with plenty of motive and gain? The room grew heavy. Brianna's hand trembled as she reached to snatch the page, but I pulled it back. I stared straight at her without blinking. And there's more, I said, taking out a thick, clipped stack. I dropped it on the table with a thud that made her jump. I plan to hold this back, but maybe you need a reminder. These are your credit card statements. $15,000 spent the month Nathan died. High-end spa, New York hotel, designer clothes. And here, I flipped pages and pointed to a line, is the day you asked me to help cook for the funeral reception the same day your card ran nearly $3,000 for a dress. And this is what you call financial hardship? Brianna froze. Her eyes went wide, lips shaking, but no words came out. I leaned back, my voice lower but sharp. Nathan saw it all. My son didn't say much, but he quietly kept records. Every bill, every text, every snide remark you made behind my back. And now it's all here. Brianna clutched her chest, her face ashen like her mask had been ripped off. She stammered, Genevieve, I was overwhelmed. I needed to blow off steam. I let out a dry laugh. Blow off steam? With Nathan's money, with lies, by turning a widowed mother into a joke among your friends? I didn't raise my voice, but each word hit the table like a hammer, driving her further down. Her fingers dug into her palms. I knew she was spiraling, and that's exactly what I wanted. I leaned in and lowered my voice. The most interesting part is, I still haven't shown the heaviest evidence. What you've seen is only the surface. Nathan left plenty more, enough to shred your reputation if I choose, but I'm not rushing. I want you to sit with it and understand the ledge you're standing on. The silence was so complete I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Brianna looked up, fear and hate tangled in her eyes. But I wasn't shaking anymore. I'd come too far to back down. I stood, straightened my coat, and spoke calmly. Thanks for lunch the other day. And thanks for proving Nathan was right to believe his mother needed to prepare. Remember this, Brianna, I haven't made any of this public. But if you keep thinking about tossing me out, these papers will speak for me. I gathered everything into my bag and walked to the door. Before closing it, I turned back. Oh, and remember, everything you said yesterday and today didn't disappear. It's in my hands. You decide how you want to be remembered. The door shut, leaving Brianna slumped in her fancy living room, face ashen. Outside, I drew in the cold air. The documents in my purse felt heavy like living proof. I knew the fight wasn't over, but with each step, I was flipping the script. Most of all, for the first time in years, I didn't feel cornered. A week later, an invitation from Brianna arrived. She called it a gathering to honor Nathan. Just a small get-together for family and close friends. I held the card, feeling something off. The same woman who coldly kicked her mother-in-law out right after the funeral now wanted a memorial party? I knew immediately. This wasn't about Nathan. It was a stage for Brianna to keep playing the perfect widow. I decided to go, but this time, not empty-handed. In my purse, the documents and the pen recorder, quiet weapons Nathan left me, were ready. I knew the stage Brianna built would be the perfect place to strip off her mask. That evening, I arrived early. The house glowed with lights, white flowers lined the walkway, and scented candles filled the living room. On the long, lace-covered table were framed photos of Nathan, but almost all chosen by Brianna. Wedding shots, vacations, the two of them smiling. I noticed not a single photo of Nathan with me. Guests trickled in. I sat quietly in a corner, watching. Brianna wore a long black dress, hair in a sleek bun, makeup immaculate. She floated around the room with a wine glass, chatting up everyone. Her eyes watered, her voice trembled. Life is so empty without Nathan. He was my whole world. Family members nodded, some wiped tears, others patted her shoulder. I stayed silent, an outsider in the room. But inside, my heartbeat slowed, waiting for the right moment. Midway through, Brianna stood in the center and raised her glass. Her voice shook like she was holding back pain. "Thank you all for being here to remember my husband. Nathan was a wonderful man, and I only hope to live in a way worthy of his love." Applause filled the room. A few relatives whispered praise about her strength. I shivered, but I knew in seconds that admiration would turn to shock. I stood and spoke evenly. "Excuse me, I have something to share." All eyes swung to me. Brianna stiffened, then quickly smiled, her tone generous. "Oh, Genevieve, of course. I should say a few words. Everyone knows how much you loved Nathan." I walked slowly to the center, my hand on the pen recorder already switched on in my pocket. I scanned the room, then met Brianna's eyes. She gave a small nod to proceed. I set the pen on the table. A soft click sounded as I hit play. Brianna's voice filled the room, clear, cold, nothing like the weeping woman in front of them. "She's just an extra expense. Once the funeral's done, I'm turning her room into a home gym." "Don't worry, Nathan's too soft, he'll never push back." The room went dead silent. Relatives and friends froze. A few mouths fell open. Others stared at Brianna in disbelief. I heard the whispers ripple. My God, did she really say that? During the funeral? While Genevieve was grieving her son? Heartless. I stood still, saying nothing more. Their eyes said it all for me. Brianna's face flushed. Her lips trembled. She forced a laugh, hands up. This must be edited. Someone's trying to set me up. You have to believe me, I would never. But the family's eyes delivered the blow. An older aunt stepped forward, voice firm. "Brianna, that's your voice. No one can fake that little bitter laugh." We heard it plain as day. A cousin shook his head and sighed. "I always thought you were cold. But this? Nathan deserved better." Brianna looked around, trying to smile, but it shattered. She reached for her glass, but her hand shook so hard wine sloshed onto the table. I didn't add any more harsh words. I just looked at her for a long time, then turned to the family. "I don't need to prove much. I just want everyone to know Nathan was never blind. He saw the truth, and he protected his mother in his own way." Today, I let Brianna's own voice expose her. The whole room went silent. People no longer looked at Brianna the same way. The praise was gone, replaced by cold, scrutinizing stares. Brianna tried to stand tall, but I clearly saw her shoulders shaking, her face drained of color. She was lost inside her own performance before an audience that no longer believed. I went back to my seat and set my hand on the purse heavy with documents. I knew I still had stronger blows to land. But right now, one strike was enough to make Brianna's perfect mask fall off in front of the whole family. That night, as I left the house, I heard the whispers behind me. Unbelievable! Someone like that had the nerve to fake crying. Now I understand why Nathan changed the will. I walked into the night wind, feeling lighter. For the first time in months, the pain of losing my son wasn't smothered by humiliation. Instead, I felt a quiet strength, the strength Nathan left me, so I could keep going and let the truth finally be seen. After that evening, the whole family atmosphere changed. Relatives and friends all looked at Brianna with caution and doubt. I knew her mask had fallen, but someone used to living by deceit wouldn't quit easily. And sure enough, 2 days later, on a drizzly evening, Brianna showed up at the door of the motel where I was staying. She wore a long coat, hair wet and clinging to her cheeks, still trying to look polished. When I opened the door, she stepped in immediately and sat down like she owned the place. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was honey sweet. "Genevieve, we need to talk." I don't want a war anymore. I know you have evidence. I won't deny it. But we all want peace. I'm proposing a deal." I looked at her without answering, sat on the bed, and waited to see how the show would go on. Brianna leaned toward me and lowered her voice. "Let's split what's in the box, half and half. I don't need all of it. You keep your share, I keep mine. In return, you stay quiet. No more evidence, no making a scene with the family. Everything goes back to normal. That's the only way we both win." Hearing that, I wanted to laugh. Normal? After everything she'd done? But I didn't show it. I just nodded slightly, my voice trembling on purpose. "Maybe you're right. I'm exhausted. But how do I know you'll keep your word?" Right then, I took a neat stack of papers from the drawer. On top it said, "Investment Cooperation Agreement." I placed it on the table and slid it toward Brianna. "I don't need much. We just sign this. Harold drafted it so both sides commit. That way, no one can claim they were forced later." Brianna frowned and glanced over the papers. I knew she was suspicious, but greed won. Her eyes skimmed lines and relaxed when she saw vague phrases: investment, cooperation, commitment to shared responsibility, no claims. She looked up with a bitter little smile. "You're not that naive after all. Fine, I'll sign. I want this over." Her hand shook, holding the pen, but she signed in the end. A straight, bold signature. And the moment the ink dried, I knew the game was over. Because in that cooperation agreement, every line was a trap. Harold had carefully woven in legal clauses. Brianna admitted spending $15,000 from the life insurance on personal use, acknowledged her insults and humiliation toward me, and agreed to withdraw any claims against Nathan's assets. In other words, it was a disguised confession, and Brianna had just signed it herself. I sat quietly for a few seconds, watching her fold the papers like she'd just bought a ticket to safety. Then I said softly, "You know, Nathan always thought ahead. He planned for everything. And maybe, today, you proved he wasn't wrong." Brianna froze, eyes wide as she realized she'd been cornered completely. But there was nothing she could do. It was all on paper, with her own signature. She jumped up, face white, voice cracking. You tricked me." I answered calmly, "No, Brianna. Your greed and contempt tricked you. I only handed you a pen the rest you chose." Rain tapped the motel window. Brianna stood there a moment, then suddenly turned and left. The door slammed, leaving an oddly peaceful quiet. I stayed seated, running my hand over the freshly signed papers. Tears fell, but not from helplessness. They were the tears of a mother who had suffered loss and humiliation, and finally found her dignity again. That night I opened the window and let the night air in. I looked up at the murky sky and whispered, "Nathan, you did it. You're still protecting me, even when you're not here. And I promise, from now on, I'll live without bowing my head." I knew it wasn't entirely over with Brianna, but with her written confession and the evidence I held, she couldn't touch me anymore. The game was finished, and for the first time, I was the one who won the match. After the night Brianna put her name on that fateful paper, I knew it was closed. But with someone who lives by schemes, I could never be careless. I needed a new start, a place where each morning I woke up wasn't haunted by my former daughter-in-law's cold stare. I started looking for a home. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy, just a small apartment with enough light and quiet so my footsteps wouldn't be treated like noise. And then I found it a third-floor unit with windows facing the town park. Wide glass brought sunlight into the living room where I set an old moss-green armchair. From there, every morning I could watch other seniors walking their dogs, kids playing, and feel like I still belonged to a community. On moving day, I stood in the empty apartment, holding a small box of Nathan's keepsakes. I placed his graduation photo on the wooden shelf beside a lavender pot I'd grabbed from the shop downstairs. That alone warmed the room. I whispered, "Nathan, see? I have a new home. It's not big, but it's full of light. And this time, no one can take it from me." In the first week, I joined the seniors' women's group at the church near the park. They met regularly, sometimes book reading, sometimes just chatting and knitting. I listened to their stories, and one day I shared mine. I didn't reveal every detail, but enough for someone to understand. Don't keep your eyes shut when you're humiliated. And don't believe patience will change someone cruel. My story, though painful, was a warning to women like me. Don't let yourself be erased in the name of family. Harold, the loyal attorney Nathan trusted, visited one afternoon. He brought the original paper Brianna signed. Setting it on the table, he looked at me and said, "If she bothers you again, we have a weapon. This document is strong enough for any court to shut Brianna down. You don't need to worry anymore." I smiled, for the first time feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. For weeks I'd been bracing for a nasty call or another threat, but my phone stayed quiet. No calls, no messages. She vanished into the shadows where people who've lost their credibility hide behind silence. Still, I stayed careful. One morning I sat at my small desk, opened my laptop, and plugged in a new USB drive. I transferred every copy of the evidence, recordings, screenshots of messages, and the credit card statements Harold had helped pull. I sealed the USB in a thick envelope and mailed it to a backup law office, Harold's close friend in Boston. If anything happened to me, everything would be released automatically. That was my justice insurance. The final trap so Brianna could never crawl back up. That evening I sat alone on my balcony watching the streetlights cast gold over the trees. No more fake sobbing, no more whispered contempt. Just a cool breeze, the smell of grass from the park, and kids' bright laughter. I took a long breath, closed my eyes, and let my heart rest after the storms. Nathan was gone, but what he left me wasn't just money or legal papers. It was faith that justice, slow as it may be, can still show up, and as long as we stand our ground and hold on to our dignity, no one can turn us into trash. I poured a hot cup of tea and raised it like touching an invisible promise. From now on, I'd live for myself, not as someone else's shadow, not as a burden in anyone's eyes. I'd live as a free woman, with a small, sunlit home and the belief that justice had been sown. Some mornings I wake in my little apartment and open the window to let the sun flood the room. On the table, Nathan's framed photo sits straight, his gentle smile reminding me, "Mom, you're never alone." I pour coffee, listen to sparrows chirp outside, and realize, finally, I can breathe like a normal person again. Justice doesn't always come from courtrooms or loud verdicts. Sometimes it happens quietly through evidence, signatures, and the persistence of a heart that refuses to break. I didn't need to publicly humiliate Brianna. I just needed her to fall into her own trap. And she did. Sometimes I wonder, if Nathan were still here, what would he think? Maybe he'd hug me tight and say, "Mom, you're stronger than I thought." I know the pain of losing him will never fully fade. But within that pain, I found strength. I stood up. I wouldn't let anyone define my worth or turn me into a shadow with their insults. Sometimes I stroll in the park and chat with a few ladies from the group. They listen wide-eyed, then nod. You did what many of us wouldn't dare. I don't see myself as a hero. I'm a mother, a widow, an older woman who knows silence can be more dangerous than confrontation. Every night before bed, I still check the backup USB, looking at the neatly stored files. I don't need to use them, but knowing they exist lets me sleep. It's not just justice insurance for me. It's a reminder that truth is stronger than lies if we hold it steady. Writing down this story, I'm not seeking pity. I want to leave a message for anyone whose pastor felt belittled or trampled. Don't ever think age or loneliness makes you weak. Don't be afraid to stand up. Sometimes a single piece of paper, a pen, or a tiny recorder is enough to turn your life around. I lost my son, but I didn't lose myself. That's why I can sit here and tell you this with calm conviction. Justice always finds its way. Before I end, I want to thank everyone who stayed with me to the very end of this story. Your presence wherever you are makes me feel less alone. Where are you listening from? Please share your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know how far my story has traveled. If this touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone you care about, and don't forget to subscribe so we can keep walking together through the next stories. Every comment, every view, every bit of empathy you've given is the greatest gift to me at my age. Wherever you are, may each of us find light, find justice, and most of all, find peace in our hearts. Mom should move out the baby, and I need peace and quiet. She's too much. I heard my daughter-in-law's voice drifting in from the living room while I was spreading butter on a slice of bread. The knife froze mid-air. My son just nodded, gently soothing his wife. Moments later, he came up to me and held out a stack of senior apartment brochures with my name written clearly on top. I glanced around what used to be my kitchen. New curtains, white dishes, the family photos gone. I smiled, set the coffee spoon down softly, and nodded. "I'll think about it, sweetie." But that same night, I opened the safe, pulled out the house documents with only my name on them, and started building a trap they'd walk into without even knowing. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Nora Whitfield, 68, widowed 8 years, living in a 2-story wood house on the shore of Lakewood in Michigan. My husband Edris and I spent nearly 40 years building this place with our own hands. Every brick, every plank, every frame on the wall carries a lifetime. And yet now, the house barely holds my breath anymore. Since Aubrey, my daughter-in-law, moved in, everything began to change in a quiet, chilly way. It started with soft words. "Mom, let me swap these curtains to make it brighter." I agreed, not suspecting a thing. Then my blue ceramic dishes I'd used for 30 years disappeared, replaced by glossy white ones to keep things consistent. The family photos, including my wedding picture and Edris's portrait, gradually vanished from the walls. Aubrey's reason always sounded so reasonable. "Just storing them for now so they won't get dusty, Mom." But all those for nows added up to a cold, empty space in the very home I built. My son, Caleb, 34, is kind and hates conflict. He's never liked seeing anyone argue. Maybe that's why, when his wife said she wanted quiet space for the baby, he only nodded. "Mom, Aubrey's pregnant, the doctor says stress isn't good for the baby. Maybe you could look for somewhere more comfortable near the retirement home by the lake, even." His voice was as light as suggesting a different dinner, but every word cut through me like a knife. I looked straight into his eyes, so much like his father's, and just smiled. "I understand, Caleb. I'm not one to explode. I spent my life as an ER nurse where shouting and blood are everyday things. I know that flaring up only makes you weaker. What matters is to observe, remember, and act at the right time." So that night, after they went to bed, I sat in Edris's office and opened the safe. Inside were the house deed in my name, the property insurance, the property tax records, and the will I updated after Edris died. I laid everything on the desk, squared them up. On each page, a red stamp read clearly, "Owner, Nora E. Whitfield." I smiled, a thin smile, not happy, just clear-eyed. The next morning, I brewed coffee like always. The smell of fresh roast filled the air, the scent that reminds me I'm still in control. I added a pinch of cinnamon, Edris's old habit, then sat at the kitchen table. Aubrey walked in, hand on her belly, voice gentle. "Good morning, Mom. I wanted to ask, did you look over those flyers last night?" I sipped my coffee, the bitterness coating my tongue. "Yes, I'll consider it." I kept the same smile. She didn't know I'd already installed an automatic recording app on my phone to save every conversation in the house. I started an incident log. Every nurse knows how important that is. Whenever something was moved or a casual comment was made, I wrote it down: date, time, who said it, to whom, and what it was. Under each line, I put a star if it felt off. March 12, Aubrey changed the curtains. Reason: brighter for the baby. March 15, wedding photo vanished from the wall. Reason: to avoid dust. March 20, Caleb slept out. Reason: Aubrey needs quiet. Every night I looked at the log like I was gathering evidence for a case the patient didn't know they had. The house grew strange to me. Each morning Aubrey played soft music, called it pregnancy therapy. She floated through the living room in silk sleeves, hand always on her belly like a leading lady in a film about motherhood, while I, the actual mother of this home, was pushed into a silent, supporting role. I heard her tell a friend on the phone, "I love my mother-in-law, but she stresses the baby out. We need to get her somewhere else so she can rest." The voice was sugar-sweet, but underneath it was the smell of cold metal. I still went to the market, still cooked, still tended the garden, but everything I did became a thorn in her eye. One morning, I was on the phone with my sister in Chicago when Aubrey came down, annoyed. "When did you call, Mom?" "Around 10 o'clock. That's the middle of my morning sleep." "You know, the doctor says pregnant women need their morning rest. Your talking is a bit loud." I looked at her and only said, "I'll keep that in mind." In my head, I marked a red star in the log. I added a doorbell camera. Aubrey thought I was worried about security, but I wanted to know who came and went when Caleb was out. I also placed a small recorder in the living room cabinet. Everything I did was slow and careful, like chess. No need to win now, just make sure when it's my move, the other side has nowhere to go. On the third night after the move-out breakfast, Caleb said he'd sleep at work for convenience. I knew he was following his wife's plan so she could rest. I heard the car door close. Then the house fell quiet. Upstairs, Aubrey turned on the light in my room, the one Edris and I had used, and paced around, measuring and taking notes. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked up, saying nothing. Some things you only need to see to understand. That evening, I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat by the window facing the lake. The water rippled under the moon, calm in a way that felt suspicious. I missed Edris, the way he used to say, "You know, Nora, winning doesn't come from shouting, it comes from the kind of silence that scares people." I set the glass down, opened my laptop, and emailed attorney Alan Mercer, the man who helped me with paperwork after Edris passed. "Hi, Alan. I need to reconfirm my property ownership. Need to meet in person. Monday morning work?" The reply came faster than I expected. "Of course, Nora. Bring the originals, I'll verify." I closed the laptop and leaned back, listening to the wind moving through the oaks on the porch. In the dark, I wasn't afraid. I was clearer than ever. The next morning, before the sun climbed, I got up early, brewed coffee, and made a few cinnamon waffles, habits I've never dropped. Aubrey came down, surprised to see me already having breakfast. "Where are you off to so early?" she asked, syrupy sweet. "To the bank for a bit," I said, picking up my purse. "The bank? Are you withdrawing money?" "I just want to review a few old things. Like the deed, for instance." She froze for half a second, but I pretended not to notice. Driving to the law office, the early spring wind was biting, but I felt warm inside. Warm because I knew I wasn't helpless anymore. Warm because no matter how hard they tried to scrub me from this house, there was one thing they could never erase: my signature on the land papers. I stopped at a cafe by the lake, took out my notebook, and wrote another line. March 22. They think I'll leave, but I'm coming back, one step at a time. I sipped coffee and watched the morning light over the water. The wind carried the scent of pine and the chatter of sparrows. I knew this fight wasn't about the house, it was about the right to exist in my own life. As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan Mercer, confirmed. You are the sole owner. No co-ownership, no liens. I smiled as the wind lifted my gray hair off my shoulders. Well then, let's begin, I whispered. If my daughter-in-law wanted quiet for the baby, I'd give her the quiet she wanted after the storm I was preparing rolled through. 2 days after meeting the lawyer, I came home feeling oddly calm. I thought things would stay quiet longer, but the pause was only for Aubrey to prepare her next script. That morning, she stood in the kitchen with a pale green smoothie, speaking evenly and clearly like she'd rehearsed. The doctor says, at this stage, the most important thing is to avoid stress. Noise, arguments, or emotional swings can affect the fetus. I'd just come in from the garden, dirt still on my hands. Are you telling me this? I asked, keeping my tone light. Aubrey turned and gave a polite smile. It's not blaming you, Mom, just sometimes when you call or move around early, I wake up startled. My body needs morning rest. The doctor emphasized that. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and looked at her. 30 years in the ER. I've heard every sort of excuse and phrasing from patients, but there's no such thing in medicine as pregnancy stress caused by mother-in-law talking at 10 a.m. What Aubrey was saying wasn't medical advice, it was a memorized performance. That so? I smiled. I'll try to walk softly and speak quietly. Aubrey nodded, satisfied. She thought I'd stepped neatly into the supporting role she wrote for me. That evening, Caleb came home late. I sat on the porch, heard the car pull in, his heavy steps on the brick path. He looked tired, shoulders slumped. I poured him tea and asked softly, "Have you eaten?" He shook his head. Aubrey was exhausted all day. I grabbed something outside. I nodded and waited. Sure enough, a few seconds later he looked at me, hesitant. "Mom, I know. Things are tense, but please try to be understanding with Aubrey. She's trying to stay healthy. The doctor says stress can trigger contractions." I set the cup down slowly and said nothing. I just filed the exact wording in my head. That night, when everyone slept, I opened my leather journal and wrote it down. Caleb, 9:10 p.m. Please be understanding with Aubrey. The doctor says stress can trigger contractions. I added a note. Even tone. Avoided eye contact, repeating his wife's lines. The next day, while I was sweeping the porch, Mrs. Mildred, the neighbor across the street, came over, greeting me as she spoke. "Nora, I hear your daughter-in-law is having a bit of a rough time in the pregnancy? Poor thing, you must be worried." I looked up. "She told you that?" Mildred gave a polite smile. "Just small talk. She said she's been tired lately because there are too many people in the house. You know how it is, pregnant women are sensitive." I didn't answer right away. I only smiled lightly, but inside I went cold for a beat. Aubrey was spreading her own story. A narrative woven out of pity and cleverness, and her first audience was the neighbors. That afternoon, while Caleb was at work, I tried another tack. I stepped into the living room and spoke to Aubrey, who was knitting. "If you need more quiet, I can adjust my routine. I'll make calls in my room, won't turn on the TV in the mornings, even work in the garden so you can rest. Would that help?" Aubrey looked up with a thin smile. "You're so sweet, Mom. But long term, I think you should have your own space. Not for me, for you. You deserve to rest and not worry about anyone." Her voice was soft as honey, but the sentence was an eviction notice. I got it. The quiet she wanted wasn't peace, it was my absence. That night, I mentally took inventory. I realized things had gone missing without my noticing. The cedar chest where I kept Edris's letters was no longer at the foot of my bed. The blue porcelain set I bought in New Orleans 10 years ago, my pride was gone from the cabinet. The anniversary quilt Edris gave me for our 30th temporarily stored in the basement, per Aubrey. I went down to the basement to check. It was cold, dark, and stuffy. Among cardboard boxes labeled in black marker, I saw one marked, Mom's Kitchen. I opened it. There were my dishes, wrapped in old newspaper, dust settling over them like proof of deliberate forgetting. I closed the lid and exhaled slowly. I knew that if I reacted, she'd have more evidence that I'm easily agitated. So I chose silence. But my silence didn't mean surrender. From then on, I realized Aubrey had her own language of manipulation. Everything she said began with 3 words. For the baby. For the baby, don't run the washer in the morning. For the baby, don't cook strong-smelling food. For the future, you should rest. For my health, you should go out more. Each word was light as thread but tight as rope. She never gave orders, but made you feel guilty if you didn't comply. I could see myself being rewritten as the villain in her story, the selfish old mother who won't make room for the new generation. I didn't argue. I started acting. That night, I opened a small box in my desk and took out a mini recorder I used back when I was a nurse to log shifts. I dusted it off, put in fresh batteries, and set it under the bookshelf in the living room where Aubrey liked to make calls. It's small enough to go unnoticed, but the mic is very sensitive. I also changed the lock on the file cabinet holding the deed, insurance, and savings. I didn't want to wake up to find they'd been temporarily stored somewhere else. A few days later, while I was watering the porch plants, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, a screenshot of a group chat called Mommy and Friends. Aubrey's message stood out. End of this month, I'm clearing the mother-in-law's room for the nursery. We'll repaint it cream, way less gloomy. Below it, her friend commented, Nice. Wish my MIL would move out early like that. I stared at the screen and felt my hand tremble not from anger, but from contempt. I saved the image into the Evidence 2 folder, then copied it to an external drive. Every data point, every line, was a link in a chain. I didn't need to rage, I just needed to be thorough. That afternoon, I heard Aubrey laughing in the living room, voice high and bright. Of course it's exhausting. She always thinks she's right. But I'm about to have a beautiful room, just wait. Her friend's voice chimed in through the phone, music playing faintly. You deserve it. Pregnant women should be prioritized. Aubrey lowered her voice. Caleb won't push back. He just wants a quiet life. I stood behind the kitchen door, hearing every word clearly. I wanted to laugh a laugh with no joy in it. Caleb doesn't push back, true, but not pushing back isn't the same as agreeing. Some people choose silence to avoid confrontation, and that silence slowly kills them. I went back to the table, opened my journal, and wrote the day's last line, March 29. Aubrey confirms clearing Mill's room for the nursery. Confident tone, no fear. Confidence is her first weakness. I closed the journal, set the pen on the cover, and let my eyes rest on Edris's small photo on the shelf. You see this, don't you? I whispered. They think I've grown weak, but you know Nora Whitfield has never been weak. I turned off the lights and let the house settle into quiet darkness. Somewhere upstairs, Aubrey was still murmuring through a prenatal meditation, her voice steady like a lullaby of deceit. I reclined and listened to the wind slip through the window, carrying the smell of young pine and the soft lap of the lake. I knew I would sleep deeply tonight. The more this went on, the more certain I was that the game had only just begun. And I, the one they call the source of stress, am the quiet they'll soon have to face with fear. That morning I had just finished watering the carnations on the porch when I heard the click of high heels inside. Not my sound. Aubrey's the woman who walked through my house like its owner. When I stepped in, she was seated at the dining table with a glossy stack of large pages and a smile that was a bit too bright. "Oh, there you are, Mom," she chirped. "I just found something. I think you'll like it." On the table lay a cream brochure reading, Maple Ridge Senior Living, where a peaceful chapter begins. I know the format, clean, easy to read. Photos of seniors beaming in flower gardens or yoga rooms. A manufactured happiness ad designed to convince older people they're choosing freedom, not being left behind. Aubrey opened it, her pale pink nails sliding over each page. Look, Mom, the rooms are bright, with big windows facing the garden. They have transportation, diet planned meals, and a Friday dance club. You'll make lots of new friends. I looked closer. A single window studio, pale red brick, with a photo of a silver-haired woman reading beside a plastic flower vase. In the top corner, a red pen circle around that image with a handwritten note, perfect for her. You looked into this thoroughly? I asked, steady. Aubrey smiled lightly. Yes, I just did some homework first, so you don't have to do the heavy lifting. Maple Ridge is only 20 minutes away by car, with its own shuttle for shopping and appointments. Super convenient, Mom. Right then, Caleb walked in, tie still undone. He set his phone down and glanced at the brochure. You should check it out, Mom. It's nice there. No more yard work or fixing pipes. Staff handles everything. You can just relax. I rested my hand on the back of a chair and looked at them both. The room went so still it felt like the air stopped moving. I asked slowly, word by word, "Did you forget who's on the deed to this house?" They froze. Caleb's eyes slid to Aubrey, waiting for her lead. She blinked, then let out a small laugh, a little flustered. "Oh, Mom, of course no one forgot. I just thought maybe you'd be more comfortable there. I'm only thinking of the baby." I smiled. "Right, for the baby." I pulled out a chair, sat down, and lifted my coffee, blowing on it. This place does look peaceful. Exactly, Aubrey said, her voice lightening, thinking I'd softened. If you agree, I can set up a tour with the manager. Maple Ridge has a special move-in before the end of the month, and the first month's free. I set the cup down and nudged the brochure back toward her. Interesting, but I need to think carefully. After all, people say if you want to move out, you should own the place you live in first. Aubrey's smile stiffened a little. Caleb rushed to smooth things over, forcing a laugh. We just want to help you, Mom. There's nothing else behind it. Of course, I answered, steady voice, calm eyes. I believe that. I stood up and carried my coffee cup to the sink. No one said another word. I could hear Aubrey exhale softly, like she'd just dodged danger she didn't quite understand. That night, after they'd both gone to their room, I sat in the office and opened my laptop. The cream brochure was still on the desk, the lamp shining on the words, "A place to belong." I gave a small laugh. A place to belong? I've belonged to this house for 40 years. There's no reason to trade it for a 300-square-foot apartment just because someone else finds it convenient. I opened the safe, took out the original house file, and scanned each page one by one. Deed, title insurance, property, taxes, proof of homeowner's insurance. I double-checked every page, everything intact. No one has the right to touch it. I saved them in a private folder, set a passcode, and emailed the whole set to myself with the subject line, "Private, for my eyes only." Done. I opened my messages and texted attorney Alan Mercer. "Alan, please reconfirm my sole ownership of the Lakewood property. No co-owners, no liens, no transfers. Need confirmation as soon as possible." His reply came in under 10 minutes. Checked. "The house is in your name only, completely clean. I'll send a notarized copy in the morning." I looked at the message and felt lighter. Not because of the house, but because I knew I still had the right to keep the one thing my husband left me. I printed a copy that night, sealed it in a flat envelope, and wrote neatly on the front, "Legal property of Nora Whitfield." I wouldn't use it yet. I just needed it ready for a show and tell at the right moment. The next morning, sunlight passed through the new curtains, a pale beige Aubrey had put up last week. I sipped my coffee and listened to her moving around. She'd started acting like the house was already hers. She opened cabinets, rearranged dishes, then cleared the lower shelves too. "Mom, I'm just tidying a bit," she said, "so when the baby comes, we'll have a clean space." I nodded, smiling. "Go ahead, just don't touch the cabinet in my office." "Of course," she said without looking at me. At noon, I heard her on the phone in the hallway. "Yes, I think once my mother-in-law moves out, we can repaint the living room walls cream. I'll send you the new design tonight." Her voice was low, but I heard the two words clearly. "Moves out." She passed by me in the kitchen, face bright like that conversation hadn't happened. "I'm making a salad. Want some, Mom?" "Sure," I said, sitting down. "You seem busy." "Oh, just little things," she smiled, "getting ready before the baby arrives." When she turned to grab a knife, I noticed the Maple Ridge brochure still in the kitchen drawer, the fold-worn proof she'd looked at it many times. That afternoon, when Caleb got home, I was reading on the porch. He sat next to me, quiet for a moment, then said, "Mom, I know yesterday was a little clumsy. Aubrey only wants what's best." "What's best for who?" I asked, eyes on the paper. He stayed silent a few seconds. "For all of us." I folded the paper and looked out toward the lake. "Son, sometimes people say for everyone, but they really mean for themselves. I've seen that more often than you think." Caleb sighed softly. "I just don't want misunderstandings between you and her." "Misunderstandings?" I gave a small smile. "There are no misunderstandings here, Caleb." I heard everything. I set a hand on his shoulder and patted it. "Don't worry. I'm not going to argue. I'll just remind you of one thing. I know exactly whose name is on this house. And I know when it's time to remind others too." He looked at me, confused, then gave a small nod. "I understand." That night, as the house lights dimmed, I was still awake. I stood at the window and looked down at the garden Edris and I tended for 40 years. The tulip rows were budding, fresh green grass pushed up through damp soil. I remembered Edris once said, "Don't let someone plant in your garden before you know what they plan to pick." I smiled, closed the curtains. Downstairs, the living room light still glowed. Aubrey was tidying, or rather, doing a full run-through. I heard porcelain clink, measured footsteps in every corner. She was rehearsing her part, the new owner of the house. I went to bed, turned off the light, and thought, "Keep going, Aubrey. The better you perform, the harder your fall when the curtain drops." That afternoon, while I trimmed the lavender along the fence, Paula Delaney, my next-door neighbor on the right, walked over. She's a few years older than me, small frame, softly curled hair, always carrying a hint of rose. She held out a bag of freshly picked apples and spoke as if casually, "Nora, I don't mean to pry, but yesterday I had to stop by the Crescent Hotel, the one across from the gas station, and I saw Aubrey with a man." I paused my shears. "What man?" Paula lowered her voice. "I don't know his name, but he wore a dark suit, drove a black Lexus, confident build, around 40. I recognized Aubrey by her hair and that cream coat she often wears. They didn't look around, just walked in holding hands. I called her name, but she acted like she didn't hear. I kept my composure, smiled, and accepted the apples. "Maybe you saw wrong," I said softly, but inside, the pieces started to shift. That night I wrote in my journal, "April 2nd, Paula Delaney says she saw Aubrey with an unknown man at the Crescent Hotel. Description, dark suit, silver watch, black Lexus, not Caleb." I reread it several times, stopping on "not Caleb." Some things you don't want to believe, but a woman's intuition, especially after nearly 7 decades, rarely misses. 3 nights later, close to midnight, I woke to a soft laugh from the living room. That laugh was light and flirtatious, but completely different from Aubrey's voice when she spoke in front of Caleb. It sounded truer, freer, more bare. I stepped down the stairs slowly, careful not to make a sound. In the warm spill from the living room, I saw two shadows on the wall, a tall, broad-shouldered man lounging in a chair, Aubrey leaning toward him, a glass of wine in her hand. The man's voice was low and confident. "Told you, it's only a matter of time. Once everything's set, you'll have what you want," Aubrey answered, breathy. "I'm just scared of being found out." "No one suspects a thing," he chuckled. "Just let it all look natural. I'll take care of you and of our baby." A chill ran up my spine. Our baby? Those two words cut like ice. I didn't step in. I walked into the kitchen instead and turned the faucet on hard, letting the rush of water serve as a warning bell. The voices in the living room softened. A few seconds later, Aubrey came into the kitchen in a silk nightgown, smoothing her hair. "You're still up, Mom?" she asked lightly, like nothing had happened. "I was thirsty," I said. "Can't sleep?" She smiled, eyes flicking toward the living room. "Just watching TV, those late-night cooking shows." "Got company?" I asked, though I knew the answer. Aubrey shook her head with a tight smile. "No. Who would visit at this hour?" I held her gaze for a few seconds, then nodded and turned off the water. "Right. Cooking shows this late? Must be quite interesting." She said nothing, then slipped away quickly. I heard a door close softly, men's shoes glide over hardwood, and minutes later, an engine start in the driveway. The next morning, Aubrey acted like nothing happened. She blended a smoothie, put on meditation music, and talked about redesigning the nursery. Caleb kept leaving early and coming home late, repeating a line like he'd been hypnotized. "Aubrey needs to rest, Mom. Please don't add pressure." I just smiled and didn't argue, but I started gathering evidence. I opened the smart doorbell app I'd installed weeks before, the kind with motion detection and auto record. Sure enough, the history showed a clip at 11:47 p.m. A tall man in a dark suit entering the house without looking up at the camera. I zoomed in and caught his left wrist glinting a big silver watch. I downloaded the clip and named it Crescent Entry 11:47 p.m. From then on, I watched Caleb's work schedule closer. He said he had back-to-back shifts at the company, even overnights. Aubrey, meanwhile, was freer than ever. She entertained guests, signed for personal packages, and sometimes disappeared for hours with no explanation. I started logging everything. April 4th, black Lexus parked out front at 8:15 p.m. Camera captures a male figure matching April 2nd. April 5th, Caleb says he's sleeping at work. 10:32 p.m. Doorbell light on for 2 minutes. Motion detected. No clear face. April 6th. Aubrey on a living room call. "Don't worry. Things are moving." I felt like I was living in a play where I was both witness and audience. One afternoon, while Caleb was at work, I heard a car stop out front. I peeked through the curtain. That same black Lexus. The man got out this time. I saw more clearly. Around 40, tall, broad shoulders, dark hair with some gray, an Omega watch on his wrist, perfectly fitted navy suit. He rang the bell. Unhurried. Seconds later, Aubrey opened the door, her face lighting up without thinking. He brushed her cheek before stepping inside, so intimate it couldn't be just friends. I stayed behind the kitchen door, heart pounding but strangely clear-headed. This was Graham Pierce. I knew his name from an event card that fell out of Aubrey's coat pocket the other day. A business dinner for Pierce Financial Group. The timing lined up perfectly. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I let them get a little more confident so my trap would be fuller. I opened my phone and checked the camera app. The picture was clear. Graham came in carrying a shopping bag, set it on the table. They sat close, laughing. I turned on remote audio recording and saved the whole conversation. "Graham, I'm getting everything in place. Once she moves out, the house will be in your name. You know that. Aubrey. I'm afraid his mother will find out. Graham. She won't suspect a thing. Just play the exhausted wife, people will pity you. Aubrey. I can't stand this anymore. I want it over fast. Graham. Patience, my love. You'll have it all. When it ended, I sat in the dark and replayed it, my hands still cold. So for the baby, for health, for the future, it was all dialogue and a plan to take what wasn't theirs. From then on, I opened a new folder on my computer called Crescent. I saved everything inside: photos of the Lexus, camera videos, audio files, the event log, even a copy of Paula's message. I organized it like a medical chart, tagging each item by date and time. I know this much: people who think they're smarter than everyone else make the same mistakes, they leave trails. Aubrey is too young. Graham is too arrogant. The next night I heard a car again, this time not the Lexus but a borrowed sedan. The engine cut off, silence settled. I stayed in bed, eyes open. No need to go downstairs, I just grabbed my phone and opened the camera app. The image popped up, Aubrey opening the door in a robe, eyes gleaming. Quick note: April 8th, Graham Pierce shows up for the third time this week. Time, 11:06 p.m., Caleb out. I looked at the screen and murmured to myself, "Go on, Aubrey. Keep believing I'm blind." Outside, the night wind moved through the garden, lavender stalks trembling. Soft laughter floated from the living room, glasses clinked. I closed my eyes, no longer hurt, only cold, with the clarity of someone who knows a new chapter is coming, and I'm the only one holding the pen. I opened the Crescent folder and added one more line to the notes file: prep for the reveal. The more they believe, the cleaner the evidence. And I smiled, a small smile like a breath in the night, holding a quiet promise: they won't know what's waiting on the other side of this door. That Saturday morning, I came home earlier than planned after stopping by the lakeside flower shop. I thought I'd spend the day reorganizing the memory cabinet in the living room, the place I used to keep our wedding photo, a few family pictures, and the crystal vase Edris brought back from Paris in 1982. But as I turned into the drive, I knew something was wrong. Nearly a dozen strange cars packing the yard, the gate wide open, music and laughter spilling from the house. I got out, still holding a bunch of pink tulips. From the porch I could see through the living room glass, people moving around, blush pink and pale blue everywhere. Balloons, cake, ribbons, and a wood sign with big letters, "Baby Sprinkle, celebrating Mommy to be Aubrey." I stood still. No one had told me about this party. The first feeling wasn't anger, it was a strange emptiness. I pushed the door open. No one noticed me. The music swallowed the sound of it. A group of young women, dressed to the nines, were laughing around a table draped in white lace. On the table, among the cake and gifts, I saw a black and white ultrasound frame placed at the center, next to a sign, "Welcome, Little Pierce Whitfield." I froze. They'd spliced Pierce onto my family name. I looked around. Every family photo of mine was gone. My wedding picture with Edris, Caleb's graduation photo, even Edris's memorial portrait by the vase gone. In their place, ultrasound images, greeting cards, the words, "New Beginnings." I could hear my heart beat faintly, but each beat was sharp. Aubrey came out of the kitchen, belly round, white lace dress, a pale pink sash across her chest glittering, Mom-to-be. She saw me eyes wide for half a second, then quickly put on a warm smile. "Mom! Oh, I didn't think you'd be home this early. We wanted to surprise you." Maybe the surprise came a bit too soon. She smiled, but there was something colder than the tile under my feet in that smile. I nodded slightly and said quietly, "Looks like you've all been busy." Yes, we wanted the house to feel fresher, to match the happy mood. She glanced around and lowered her voice just enough for me to hear. "It's wonderful to have extra space like this, isn't it, Mom?" Those words, extra space, landed like a light but solid knock on the wall. I knew exactly what it meant. Not a compliment, but a notice that I'd been erased from the frame. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone and pretended to snap a few keepsake photos. In truth, I photographed the entire room, every detail, every bare spot where Edris's picture used to hang. I moved slowly, like a proud mother documenting her child's party, but my lens was capturing the evidence of a takeover. As I passed the kitchen, I heard a low voice in the corner, a familiar male voice. I paused, took half a step back, pretending to check my phone. Through the crack in the door, I saw a man in a dark suit with a bright silver watch, Graham Pierce. He was handing Aubrey a white envelope, and she quickly tucked it into the pink sash across her chest. I went still. No one brings an envelope to a baby sprinkle unless it isn't a congratulatory note. You're sure? Aubrey's voice was low, a little shaky. Absolutely. After the baby's born, he'll take care of it, Graham said. I didn't mishear it. He'll take care of it. His voice was so clear I could hear the breaths between the words. I tapped record on my phone, set it to voice memo, and slipped it into my pocket. I stood there for nearly a minute, until laughter and glass clinks rose up again. They came out smiling like nothing had happened. I stepped in with a calm smile. Sorry, I forgot to grab more plates. Graham looked at me, hesitated, then gave a polite nod. Hello, Mrs. Whitfield. I'm a friend of Caleb's. Of course, I said. I've heard a lot about you. The answer unsettled his eyes for a second. Aubrey jumped in fast. Graham works at the same company as Caleb, Mom. Oh, great. Then you two must really understand each other, I said evenly, face unchanged. I glanced at the envelope corner peeking from the sash and turned away as if I hadn't noticed. The party went on loud and sparkling, like a carefully staged set. I sat in a corner and watched. Aubrey's friends kept praising how cozy the house felt, marveling that she'd pulled off such a big party so close to her due date. Someone joked, "This place looks straight out of a magazine." The lady of the house has such great taste. The lady of the house. No one realized the real owner sat in the corner, smiling quietly like a spectator at a tragicomedy. I listened, missing nothing. While they toasted and talked about the future, the small tells stood out. The ring Graham set on the table, the way Aubrey looked at him across the crowd, their hands brushing under the tablecloth. Those details spoke louder than anything they said. I pulled out my phone to check the voice memo was still recording. Laughter, chatter, and then a crisp exchange. Graham, he believes you now, right? Aubrey, completely. He doesn't suspect a thing. Graham, good. Now we just wait for the baby to be born. And I'll handle the rest. I stopped the recording and saved the file under the name Sprinkle Proof. Then I opened the camera and did another slow pan. This time deliberately catching Graham's face in the frame and his hand resting lightly on Aubrey's back. The afternoon drifted by like fog. As guests started to leave, I stayed, smiling and shaking hands with each person. Everyone thought I was the easygoing, chill, understanding mother-in-law. One of Aubrey's young friends even said, "I wish my mother-in-law were like you, so everything could be this peaceful." I just smiled and said quietly, "You're mistaken, this isn't peace yet." When the last door closed, the house fell silent. Balloons sagged, crumbs of cake stuck to the tile. Aubrey and Graham had stepped outside with a few friends to see guests off. I used those minutes to back up the photos and audio to an external drive and emailed everything to my private account. Folder name, Crescent Sprinkle Proofs. When they came back in, I was already standing on the stairs, still holding the pink tulips from that morning, their stems not yet in water. "Nice party," I said. "Thanks, Mom," Aubrey replied, voice light as if she had no idea what I'd seen. "Yeah, just one pity," I said, walking slowly toward my room. "What's that?" "It's a pity Edris didn't get to witness this. He would have found it interesting." She went quiet. I saw a flash of caution in her eyes, then it disappeared. That night, when the house was still, I sat alone in the office, desk lamp spilling light over the property file, printed stills of Graham and Aubrey from the door camera, and the audio file I had just downloaded. Each small piece of evidence clicked into place like tiles in a final mosaic. I opened email and typed a short note to attorney Alan Mercer. Alan, I think we have enough to proceed with step 1. Prepare everything. I'll be in touch in the morning. I hit send and closed the laptop. Outside, wind moved through the pines, carrying the smell of rain and the whisper of leaves. I felt no hurt, no anger, only a cold, steady clarity. I stood, turned off the light, and went to my room. Tomorrow, the storm arrives. But tonight, I'll sleep well because this time, I'm the one holding the knife by the handle. The next morning, first light filtered through thin curtains and washed over the long dining table where everything was about to happen. I'd prepped the night before a thick, crisp file, plastic-sleeved and tucked neatly into a pale yellow rigid envelope. On the front, in bold print, I'd written, Property Deed, 112 Lakewood Drive. I made coffee, so calm it surprised me. The house was quiet. The click of the coffee maker echoed in the dim. I felt no tremor, no anger, only the certainty that it was time to put everything back where it belonged. Around 10 a.m., Caleb's car sounded at the gate. The door opened. He walked in with Aubrey and 2 of her friends, Kara and Melissa, the same faces I'd glimpsed at the baby sprinkle. They laughed loudly, carrying gift bags and pastel-wrapped packages. I was already seated at the table, coffee on my right, the envelope squarely in the middle. "Oh, you're up early, Mom," Aubrey chirped, a little too confident. "I invited my 2 friends over. We're planning the official baby shower. Hope you don't mind?" "Of course not," I said lightly. "Actually, I've got something to say too, and it's even better with all of you here." That sentence made all 4 of them pause. Caleb pulled out a chair, looking briefly uneasy, while Aubrey kept smiling, though her mouth tightened. I opened the envelope and slid out the notarized deed white paper, black letters, a round stamp. I set it in the center, turned the text to face them. "This," I said calmly, "is the ownership document for this house." I waited a beat and looked straight at my son. "This house is in my name, mine alone. No co-owners, no liens, no transfers, all fully legal." The room went so quiet it felt like someone had sucked the air out. Kara, Aubrey's blonde friend, blinked, eyes darting around, clearly unsure what she'd walked into. Melissa pressed her lips together and glanced at Aubrey. Caleb picked up the paper, his eyes tracking each line, every legal clause, every stamp, every number. When he reached sole ownership, Nora Whitfield, his face fell and his shoulders slumped. "Mom, what do you mean?" Caleb asked softly, voice shaking. "It means," I said, still even, "everything in this house, from the porch to the fence to the ground under your feet, belongs to me, no one else." Aubrey let out a brittle laugh, trying to hide her panic. "Mom, you're scaring me. We never said the house wasn't yours. Why so tense about it?" I met her eyes, cold as a December lake. "No one's tense. I just like clarity, and paperwork doesn't lie." A heavy silence followed. The air shifted, thickened, as if an invisible wall had just risen across the table. Kara and Melissa glanced at each other, feeling the tension but too cautious to speak. Aubrey pressed her palms on the table, leaned forward, trying to regain control. "Mom, this isn't the way to talk to us in front of guests." "We're family." I looked at her and answered gently, "Because we're family. I need to say this in front of others so everyone hears it clearly." In that moment, Aubrey lost control for the first time. She straightened, face flushed, anger flashing where fake sweetness used to be. "Are you trying to humiliate me?" "No," I said. "You're doing that on your own." The room froze. Caleb sank into his chair, fingers laced together. I could hear him swallow, trying to choke down pride and confusion. I knew right then the first crack had appeared. Aubrey turned to her friends, voice trembling but trying to sound normal. "Sorry, must be the pregnancy hormones making me extra sensitive." Kara popped up fast. "It's okay, maybe we should grab supplies before lunch." The two gathered their things and left faster than the wind. As the door clicked shut, I stood, slid the papers back into the envelope, placed it in the buffet drawer, turned the key, and locked it in full view. "Now," I said, "everything's clear. No arguments, no misunderstandings. I just want us all to understand exactly where things stand." Caleb said nothing. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the hardwood, unable to meet anyone's gaze. His silence was no longer complicity, it was collapse. I could see it in his eyes, faith wobbling, a fine dust of doubt settling over everything Aubrey had said. Aubrey saw it too. She rushed to him and set a hand on his shoulder. "Don't listen to her, babe. We never meant to take anything from her." Caleb didn't answer. He closed his eyes. "I need some air." Then he stood and walked out without looking back. The door shut, leaving Aubrey and me in a room as still as stone. She pressed her lips together, eyes dark. "You really think you've won?" I smiled, voice low and unhurried. "No, I've only just begun." That afternoon my phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from Aubrey poured in. "Mom, we need to talk. You're misunderstanding me. I don't know why you're doing this, but you're hurting Caleb. Don't destroy my family." I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because it wasn't necessary. Each text came and went like weak gusts against a locked window. I opened my laptop and went to my private inbox. In drafts, I typed, "Alan, please draft a 30-day notice to vacate. Reasons: unlawful occupancy, unauthorized alterations, and emotional damages. I'll sign when the final version is ready." I hit send. The screen glowed, reflecting off the table where the deed had lain. Outside, Lakewood was still. Wind skimmed the pines, a faint rustle like the first crack spidering through the house's fake shell. I said to myself softly, "Just a hairline crack, but from there, everything will split." Then I closed the laptop, lifted my cooled coffee, looked up at the white wall where my wedding photo used to hang, and smiled slowly. "It's all right. Pictures can be taken down, but this house is still mine." And soon, they'll learn some walls can speak, and they know how to deliver justice. The next morning, dew still clung to Lakewood. Thin light like foil slipped through the kitchen window. I sat at the table with a steaming mug of coffee. On the table lay a cream folder, the 30-day notice to vacate that attorney Alan Mercer had sent last night. Short, proper, fully supported by law. Under the bold headline were the reasons: unlawful occupation, unauthorized interior changes, emotional and material damage. I reread those 3 phrases. Each word carried the weight of long nights spent watching, enduring, and collecting evidence. Today, I didn't need to hide anymore. I slid the notice into an envelope, sealed it, and placed it on the table. When Aubrey's footsteps sounded on the stairs, I took a steady breath. "Good morning, Mom," she said, voice a bit hoarse, hair still mussed from a restless night. "Morning," I answered calmly. "I have something for you." She eyed the envelope, curious. "What is it?" "Paperwork." I pushed it toward her. "Notice to vacate in 30 days. Effective today." The air went solid. Aubrey stood frozen, clutching the envelope without opening it. "What did you say?" I said. I enunciated. "You two have 30 days to leave. The reasons are listed: unlawful occupation, unauthorized changes, and emotional harm." She gave a strained laugh, voice cracking. "I'm pregnant. You can't throw a pregnant woman out of a house." I looked straight into her eyes, unblinking. Pregnancy isn't a license to take what isn't yours. In that instant, I saw the mask split. Her mouth opened, then shut, breath quickening. "You're cruel," she whispered. People will think you're heartless. I shrugged. People can think whatever they like. I have proof. That evening, as I was clearing the table, Caleb came home. His face was drawn, eyes shadowed. He stood in the kitchen doorway, keys still in hand, voice low. "Mom, I know you're angry, but please, don't do this. At least wait until after the baby's born. I don't want a child starting life like that." I dried my hands and turned around. "Do you really believe that child is yours, Caleb?" The second the question left my mouth, the room fell into absolute silence. Only the wall clock ticked, loud enough to raise. Goosebumps. Caleb stared at me, brow furrowed like he was hearing a foreign language. "What did you just say?" I held his gaze. "I asked if you're sure that baby is yours." He didn't answer right away. His fists tightened, then loosened. In his eyes I saw a chaos, suspicion, shame, and a swelling kind of hurt. He said quietly. "Of course it's mine. Why would you say that?" "Of course," I repeated softly. "Or do you just want to believe that?" Caleb bowed his head and stayed silent for a long time. I didn't add another word. I poured him a cup of coffee, slid it toward him, and stepped away. Some questions don't need answers because silence already is one. That night, alone in the office, I logged everything in my journal. April 17th, 9 p.m. Delivered 30-day notice to Aubrey. Reaction: shock, pregnancy as shield. Reply: pregnancy isn't a license to take what isn't yours. Caleb begged to delay until after the birth. Asked, "Are you sure the baby is yours?" Hesitation, no answer. Status: faith beginning to wobble, cracks spreading. I closed the book and pinned a new calendar sheet to the cabinet. I marked the 30th day in red and wrote a small note beneath. Deadline 30 days. I stared at that number for a long time. 30 days, not long, but enough to expose everything. 2 days later, Aubrey launched an image war. She posted a belly photo on social media. Caption: "When your mother-in-law kicks you out at 8 months pregnant, remember, God sees." Below it, dozens of pitying comments, sympathy, attacks on the heartless mill. I read every line and only smiled. Hours later, she called me, voice choked. "People are asking what happened. I don't know what to say. Do you want the whole world to hate me?" "I don't need the world to hate anyone," I said evenly. "I just need the truth." "What truth? How far will you go to humiliate me?" I opened my Biznown laptop and tapped a few keys, tone calm. "If you want to talk truth, I can send you copies of the photos, audio, and camera logs." She went quiet. I could hear her breath quicken on the line. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said. "I'm reminding you the file is complete." She hung up. 3 minutes later, I got texts. "You won't destroy me. I'll make everyone believe me. I'll protect this child at all costs." I read them without anger. I only felt pity. A young woman using emotion to hide the truth while the evidence lined up, waiting for daylight. That afternoon, I went to Dr. Karen Doyle's clinic, a former colleague from my nursing days. I laid things out briefly and asked, "If we need a paternity test after the birth, how does that work?" Karen looked at me, frowning a little. "Nora, are you sure? This isn't small." "I'm not sure," I said. "Which is why I need the truth." She nodded, her voice softening. "When the baby is born, if the legal parents both consent, it's straightforward. If there's a dispute, you'll need legal paperwork." "Legal paperwork I have," I said. "And I can get more if needed." Karen was quiet for a moment, then said, "I understand. I'll help." I left the clinic feeling slightly lighter. Things were moving in the right direction, even if it wasn't a pleasant one. Late that night, Caleb knocked on my door. He came in and sat opposite me, fingers knotted together. The desk lamp lit his face tired, but for the first time, clearer. "Mom," he said softly, I need to ask you straight. Do you have proof? I mean, about Aubrey and that man?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Do you want the truth?" He nodded. I opened my laptop without a word. On the screen, the video and audio files appeared. I didn't hit play, just let him see the titles. Crescent, entry, 11:47 p.m., sprinkle, proof, audio, living room. Caleb didn't touch the keyboard. He just looked, and I saw the moment he understood that the thing he feared most might be real. He leaned back, hands trembling. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," I replied. "You just need to want the truth. From there, everything clarifies on its own." He nodded slowly. For the first time in months, I didn't see evasiveness in my son's eyes, only the quiet acceptance of truth arriving. After he left, I sat alone. I scrolled past the files, then turned off the screen. Outside the window, a waning moon hung over the lake, scattering light across the water. I ran my fingers over the table where the notice had sat that morning and smiled faintly. The question had been planted, and like any seed, truth only needs time to sprout. I closed the journal, blew out the light, and whispered, "Now let's see how long they can hold out before they break the silence themselves." That night a fine, relentless rain came down, like it was washing away the last of the lies. I was about to turn off the light when my phone buzzed an unknown number, no name saved, no profile photo. The first text was just 5 words. "You should see this." Below it were 3 photos sent back to back, each one slicing straight through the shell of quiet Caleb and I had tried to keep. Photo 1, Aubrey and Graham Pierce, yes, clearly him standing under the yellow lights of the parking lot outside the Crescent Inn. They were holding hands, heads tilted close, smiling in a way no co-workers would. Photo 2, Graham's hand on Aubrey's pregnant belly, not a polite touch, but intimate and possessive. The streetlight glinted off that familiar silver watch on his wrist, and Aubrey's face glowed relaxed, bright, not at all like someone afraid of being found out. Photo 3, the 2 of them at the front desk, Graham handing a room key card to the clerk. Aubrey tilted her head, hair loose, a small smile on her lips. Under the photo, the sender added one more line, "He's paying for both her and the baby." I felt my blood go cold, but strangely, I didn't shake. Just absolute stillness. No panic, no anger, only confirmation of what I'd known too well for a long time. I saved the 3 photos to a private folder, locked it with a password, then backed everything up to an external drive. I didn't call Caleb. I knew if I told him now, he'd explode and that would ruin everything. A storm should only break when the person holding the reins is ready. I opened my computer and ran the photos through metadata checks. Each image had geolocation and timestamps. First photo, 11:46 p.m., April 18th. Second photo, 11:50 p.m., same night, same spot. Third photo, 11:58 p.m., Crescent Inn lobby. I opened my log and cross-checked. That exact night, Caleb had reported staying at the office to check the systems. I'd also written, Aubrey left the house at 10:40 p.m., returned at 1 a.m. Everything matched down to the minute. I stared at the screen in silence. The blue light washed over my face, showing every crease at the corners of my eyes, marks of the years, and of the clear-headedness youth rarely has. I picked up my phone, opened the Photos app, and made a slideshow with the 3 pictures in time order. I chose a slow fade transition not for drama, but to give the viewer time to see each detail, the hand, the eyes, the space or lack of it between their bodies. File name, Crescent, photo set. Then I opened voice memos, pulled up the recording from the baby sprinkle, and pinned it to the top. I renamed it Crescent Proof, short, clean, unmistakable. I sat at my desk and opened the brown leather notebook I use for timelines. In careful script, I wrote line by line. April 2nd, neighbor Paula Delaney saw Aubrey with Graham Pierce at the Crescent Hotel. April 4th, April 8th, door camera. Logged a black Lexus in front of the house 3 times. April 12th, baby sprinkle. Graham appeared and handed Aubrey an envelope. April 18th, 11:46 p.m. Photos at the Crescent Inn. Graham's hand on Aubrey's belly. Witness: Paula Delaney. Evidence: photos, video, audio, metadata. I looked up at the final line. I added myself, everything will be presented publicly with a witness, with evidence, and with lawful ownership. That was all it took to frame a confrontation no one could dodge. Around midnight, I called Alan Mercer. His voice was rough and sleepy, but the second I said, "We have photos," he snapped awake. "Even stronger than audio," I said. Metadata matches the hours Caleb reported being away. "Do we have a witness?" "Yes, neighbor Paula Delaney. I logged dates and times, and she's willing to testify if needed." "Perfect," he said. "Then just wait for my signal. When I say stage ready, you present everything to the right people, at the right time, in the right place." "Where?" I asked. "Right in that house," he said, pausing. "Nothing beats the truth laid out in front of family." I was quiet a few seconds, then let out a small laugh. "Exactly. I want them to hear it in the very house they thought they'd taken." After I hung up, I turned off all the lights except the desk lamp. On the table sat files, a USB drive, printed photos, an external hard drive, everything organized like pieces arranged for the final battle. I looked at them and felt like I was steering a storm from its eye. The window was cracked. The lake air came in cold. I pulled my cardigan tighter, leaned back, and felt a soft tiredness ripple through me, but in my head, everything was crystal clear. It had been a long time since I felt in control of my life. No longer the annoying, outdated, in-the-way mother. No longer a shadow in my own home. Now I was the only one who knew all the pieces and held the key to them all. Before bed, I opened the text thread from the unknown number. No name, no photo, just a short line. "He's paying for both her and the baby." I didn't know who sent it, maybe a hotel employee, maybe a bystander who wanted justice, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that someone chose to stand with the truth. I replied with one line, "Thank you." Then I deleted the chat from the phone, but kept everything saved to a second external drive and locked it in the safe with the house papers. I turned off the light but couldn't sleep right away. In the dark, I heard the soft patter of rain on the roof, each drop like a quiet count toward the moment when everything would blow open. I thought back to the first morning Aubrey said, "You should move out," a voice sweet as sugar with a razor underneath. Back then I felt stripped of everything. Space, my son's affection, my dignity. But now, looking back, I understood. Sometimes loss is the purest form of freedom. I lay down and pulled up the covers. In my mind, I saw those 3 photos again under the jaundiced streetlights where 2 people thought no one was watching. They didn't know each picture is now a bullet of truth, and I'm the only one holding the trigger. For the first time in months, I closed my eyes and slept deep. No fear, no anger. Just one thought, light as breath. The storm has reins, and I'm the one holding them. 3 days later, Aubrey announced a cozy dinner to bring the family's spirit back together. She said it breezily, as if there hadn't been legal notices, fights, or clenched teeth threats over text. "Just a few of Caleb's co-workers, Mom," she said, eyes shining innocent. "They want to meet his family, and I think you should be there. You're the soul of this house." I smiled. "Yes, that's right. I'll be there." She didn't know I'd been waiting for this, an audience, bright lights, a witness, and the perfect timing to strip everything bare. Friday night, the house glowed, dinner scents mixing with expensive perfume. I took the seat at the head of the table, the spot Edris used to claim. Aubrey breezed between the kitchen and dining room, smile pasted on. Caleb was quiet, face tight. The meal unfolded in that practiced, fake calm. A couple of Caleb's co-workers, 2 men and a woman, talked shop, threw in a few compliments about the food, and called the house cozy. I caught the sideways looks at Aubrey, a mix of curiosity and discomfort. When dessert came out, I set my spoon down and took out my phone. "Let me share a few photos," I said lightly. Every eye turned to me. I set the phone in the center and swiped. The screen lit up the 3 photos one by one under the warm dining room lights. First photo: Aubrey and Graham holding hands under the hotel's streetlight. Second: Graham's hand on her belly, too intimate to deny. Third: the 2 at the front desk, Graham handing over a key card, smiling. Nobody spoke. The soft clink of flatware on china stopped cold. I didn't look at Aubrey, I looked at Caleb. He froze. His jaw clenched. His eyes locked on the screen. Under the light, his face went pale, like someone had yanked the air from his lungs. "Aubrey," he said quietly, voice snagging. "What is this?" Aubrey blinked fast, mouth opening and closing. It's a misunderstanding," she stammered. "Graham is a coworker. He was just comforting me because I've been under stress." I leaned in and swiped to the next file. From the phone speaker came a clean audio clip, slick as a blade through fabric. "Graham, once the baby's born, he'll handle everything." "Aubrey, I'm afraid your mother will find out." "Graham, she won't suspect a thing. Just keep playing the exhausted wife." I didn't feel anger, only a cold line down my spine. Have you ever heard a sentence that made your heart stop because you knew everything changed in that instant? If you have, share it in the comments. Maybe we'll understand each other better through those cracks. My voice sounded far away, like I was an outsider to my own play. The air in the room thickened. One coworker lowered his head and slid his wine glass aside. The woman pressed her lips together and shook her head. I didn't need to say another word. Aubrey's polite mask was breaking on its own. "Aubrey," Caleb said, firmer now. "Who is he? And the baby?" She shot up, her chair clattering backward. "Who are you listening to? A jealous mother trying to wreck her son's family?" "I'm listening to you," Caleb cut in. "And to what you said to Graham Pierce." Graham's name hit like a knife. I saw Aubrey's lips tremble. She looked around for an ally, but everyone stared at the table. No one defended her. No one spoke. I stood, picked up my phone and slipped it into my pocket. "Dessert was good," I said quietly. "Thank you for inviting me. It helped me see my future daughter-in-law more clearly." That night, after the guests left, the fight exploded in the living room. I heard every word, every breath between curses. "I deserve my own life. You never understood me," Aubrey screamed, voice shredded. "And the baby, Aubrey, is it mine?" Caleb asked, heavy and hoarse. No answer. Just the scrape of a suitcase over wood, the rasp of a zipper, the slam of a door. I went to the window and looked out at the drive. Under the porch light, the black Lexus pulled up. Graham Pierce stepped out, popped the trunk, lifted luggage. A few minutes later, Aubrey appeared in a long coat, never looking back. Graham took her arm and opened the door. They got in, and the Lexus slid into the dark, its taillights dragging a red streak across the wet road. I stood still, not happy, not triumphant. Just the quiet after a storm you knew was coming. When I turned back, Caleb had collapsed onto the sofa. His head was in his hands, eyes red. He looked hollow, like someone had ripped out his heart. I went to the kitchen, made a mug of peppermint tea, and set it in front of him without a word. He looked up, eyes wet. "How long have you known?" "Since you started avoiding my eyes," I said. "And you waited until now to say anything?" "I didn't say anything," I answered. "I let the truth speak." He nodded and dropped his gaze. I sat beside him, without touching his shoulder, without comforting words. Sometimes pain needs to breathe, not be smothered. The clock ticked. Wind nudged the window. In a house that had echoed with arguments, there was finally real quiet. Caleb spoke at last, voice ragged. "I've been blind for too long. You tried to tell me and I wouldn't listen." I shook my head slightly. "No, Caleb. I never tried to tell you. I waited for you to see." He let out a thin, bitter laugh. "Well, I see now. And what will you do with it?" "I don't know," he whispered. "But for the first time, I know you weren't wrong." I nodded. Nothing more needed saying. I poured more tea and nudged the cup toward him. Steam rose, wrapping the warm lamplight in a thin haze between us. We sat there a long time, both quiet. The house was peaceful, the kind of peace only those who've lost something can recognize. When the clock crept toward midnight, I stood and eased the door shut. The soft click of the lock was the sound of an old chapter closing. In the living room, Caleb still sat staring at the steaming tea. He wasn't a man lost in a mirage anymore. In that light, I saw my son hurt, fragile, but real. I walked back and sat beside him. No talk of forgiveness, no lessons. I just kept my hand near his close enough so he knew I was there. In the quiet, with warm tea and the wind at the eaves, the mother-son bond that lies had severed began to tie itself back together by the truth. And that, to me, was the only victory that mattered. The next morning, early sun poured through the living room windows. The light was soft but clear, catching dust motes still hanging, the dust of long silence, of false words, of hidden wounds. I poured myself coffee and stood looking around the house. It was strangely quiet. No staccato heels, no heavy perfume, no lectures about how the baby needs quiet. Just me, Caleb, and the truth. I started the morning by dusting the family photos. The one of the three of us at Lake Michigan when Caleb was 10, I was in a red sweater. Edris had an arm around our boy, and Caleb grinned, holding a fishing pole bigger than he was. I blew the dust from the corners and set it back where it belonged, above the mantel. Right beside it, I rehung Edris's portrait, the one Aubrey had taken down, to brighten the room. I stepped back and looked at my late husband's smile in the wooden frame. Light bounced off the glass with a soft gold. "Good morning, Edris," I said softly. "Everything's going back where it belongs." The next room, the one Aubrey had christened the nursery, was quiet now. Pale pink bits, ribbons, baby coming soon signs still lingered, remnants of a false dream. I took down the crib, mobile plastic stars turning lazily, and placed it in a box. Then I broke down the white crib, wiped each slat clean, and stacked it neatly. In its place, I painted the walls a warm sand, the color Edris once chose for the living room. The faint scent of new paint mixed with dry wood and the morning breeze through the window. I set up a small guest bed, tucked in crisp white sheets, and put a little vase of lavender on the nightstand. The room wasn't a symbol of possession anymore. It was a quiet corner for anyone who came here in good faith. By noon, I boxed up Aubrey's decor: gold-plated frames, glass vases, throw pillows embroidered with "Home Sweet Home," all wrapped, taped, and sealed. I labeled each box by hand. Property of Aubrey Whitfield. Hold for 30 days. No anger, no spite. Just doing exactly what the lawyer advised, reestablishing boundaries. Caleb came in as I sealed the last box. He didn't say anything at first, just watched, then stepped beside me and helped press the tape tight. After that, he grabbed the toolkit and started tightening door hinges, changing bulbs, and fixing the loose stair rail that had been wobbling for months. I watched without stepping in. The son I thought I'd lost to sweet, poisonous words was coming back, not with promises or tears, but with small, steady actions. When Caleb climbed the ladder to change the bulb, the new light spilled over the dining table. I caught a fleeting smile in his eyes, tired but calm. "Mom," he said, barely above a breath, "the house looks so much brighter." I answered, "Because the darkness is gone, son." That afternoon, we sat in the living room and went over the papers Mercer had sent. I said, "No need to contact Aubrey anymore. Let the lawyers handle it. We'll wait out the 30 days. Caleb nodded. I don't want to talk to her. At least now I know who's actually on my side. We didn't need more words. Between us was a quiet agreement, something I hadn't felt with my son in years. I cleaned the kitchen at the end of the day. When I opened the cabinet, I found the blue porcelain set, the one Aubrey had temporarily stored in the basement. I washed each piece, dried them, and put them back in their place in straight rows. When my hands touched the cool porcelain, I realized this house was never lost, only covered by the dust of lies. I turned on the oven and baked waffles. The cinnamon drifted through the kitchen, sweet and full of memory. It had been years since that smell filled the house. Back then, whenever I baked, Edris would open the window to let the breeze in and say, "A house is truly alive when it smells like something made with love." I did the same, threw open the window facing the lake. The morning air rushed in, carrying clean mist and the ripple of small waves. Sunlight bounced off the water, throwing bright specks across the wall. It felt like a simple house blessing, no priest, no ritual, just wind, light, and a heart that had stopped being afraid. Caleb stood in the doorway, a bit of paint still on his hands. He said quietly, "Mom, the house looks like it used to." I wiped my hands on my apron and smiled. "No, son. The house looks the way it's supposed to." He nodded and sat down, eyes resting on the candle I'd just lit on the dining table. I knew we were both thinking of Edris, the man who laid each brick of this house. The one who used to say, "Every storm just washes the porch clean." Late that night, I sat by the window and wrote a handwritten letter to Paula Delaney. "Dear Paula, I want to thank you not just for what you told me that day, but for your straightforwardness. You have no idea how much it helped me. In life, some people pass by for only a moment, but leave a streak of light like a lamp in the night. I hope one day you'll come over for tea and hear the end of this story when everything is finally quiet. With sincere gratitude, Nora Whitfield." I folded the letter, put on a stamp, and set it neatly on the table by the window. When night fell, I sat again in the living room. A small lamp cast warm light that reflected off the family frames. Outside, the lake was glass still. Inside, I felt no more turmoil, just a deep peace, the kind that comes after a big storm, when you know what remains is worth keeping. I said softly, not sure if it was to Edris or to myself, "The house has been returned to its rightful person. And so has my heart." One quiet morning, with golden sun coming through the window, I stood in the living room with a cup of tea, looking around the home that had just gotten its soul back. Everything was clean, warm, and tidy, but inside me there was still a quiet, empty space. The long sofa still had room to spare. The guest bed in the freshly painted room still smelled of new wood. I asked myself, what am I keeping that room empty for? Edris is gone, Caleb is mending day by day, and I, a 68-year-old woman who fought through deceit, now found my house too quiet. That afternoon, while clearing the table, I saw a small notice in the local paper. Lakewood Women's Center calls for temporary housing for domestic violence survivors. The center is over capacity and needs community shelter. I sat still for a moment. Then I picked up the phone and dialed. "Lakewood Women's Center. How can I help?" A middle-aged woman's voice, gentle but tired. "This is Nora Whitfield," I said. "I don't know how much this helps, but I have a spare room. I'd like to offer it for free the first month, if someone needs a safe place." Silence for a few seconds, then a soft exhale. "Mrs. Nora, you just saved someone you haven't met yet." 3 days later, Janelle arrived. She was 42, black hair tousled, dark circles under her eyes, clutching a small plastic bag like someone might tear it away. She didn't say much, just a slight nod when I opened the door. I didn't ask questions. I simply showed her around: kitchen, bathroom, washer, Then the spare room with fresh sheets and a lavender vase. "Here's the key," I said. "If you need anything, knock. If not, keep the kind of quiet you want." She nodded, clutching the bag to her chest. That first night, I heard water in the sink, a spoon touching a mug. Around midnight, the kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. I stepped out and found Janelle standing there, eyes startled like a child caught doing something wrong. "Sorry," she whispered. "I just wanted some tea." I smiled and pulled out a chair. "It's okay. Here, you don't have to apologize for existing." She looked at me a long time, then nodded with tears in her eyes. That night the house found its voice again, small but real. 3 weeks passed. One morning I woke to find Janelle's room empty. The closet, neat, bed made, and a folded note on the table. "Mrs. Nora, I've left not because I'm scared, but because I finally can. Thank you for the room, for the quiet, and for not asking questions. You gave me back air." Janelle. I held the note and read it over and over. "You gave me back air," made my heart tremble. Sometimes what people need isn't shelter, it's a corner where no one judges. I sat on the bed and took a long breath. The room wasn't empty anymore, it had just been filled with meaning. 2 weeks later, the center called back. "Mrs. Nora, there's a young woman and her 2-year-old. No one will take them because the child's so young. Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "Bring them." That afternoon, Mariah arrived, 23, thin, with a close-cropped haircut, carrying little Ollie with big dark eyes. When they stepped inside, Mariah froze, like she was afraid to touch anything. I just smiled, crouched to Ollie's eye level. "Hi, Ollie, do you like toy cars or blocks?" He pressed his lips together, then whispered, "Cars." I nodded. "Cars are in that corner, next to the vase." I'd already set out a basket of toys, a few cloth books, a small teddy bear, and a jar of daisies on the table. Mariah looked at me, her lips trembling. "You really prepared this for us?" "I didn't prepare it for anyone," I said. "I prepared it for people who need a place to breathe." 3 days later, the house began to change. Mornings came with small footsteps down the hall and little giggles from the living room. Afternoons smelled like roasted chicken and stewed vegetables. At night, instead of total silence, I heard a soft lullaby from the next room, Mariah's voice gentle as wind at the window. I didn't feel invaded. On the contrary, the house, the same house once taken over by lies and schemes, was full of real life now. Caleb came home for the weekend, stood in the kitchen, and smiled. "Mom, are you fostering kids?" I said, "No, I'm just lending out warmth, the thing I used to be afraid of losing." He looked around and said, "Our house sounds different." "It does." I smiled. "Now it knows how to breathe." At the end of the month, I made a small wooden sign and painted the letters by hand. Whitfield Room, 30-day bridge. I hung it by the front door, right under the trellis. No bright signage, no loud announcement, just a quiet message. If you need a temporary shelter, there's a room here, and someone who won't ask too many questions. That afternoon I sat on the porch steps and watched the sunlight stretch across the lake. Lavender drifted on the breeze. Inside, Ollie laughed out loud after spilling flour, and Mariah rushed to wipe the floor, still smiling. My chest warmed in a way I can't explain. I understood that healing isn't erasing the past. Healing is being able to open the door and let others in, to let them stay in the place where you once broke without fearing it'll be taken again. My Lakewood house had been through darkness, betrayal, and the most delicate kind of deceit. But now, it could hold others without losing itself. I looked at Edris's photo and said softly, "See, we made this old house into something bigger than revenge." Then I smiled and listened to the little tink of wind on the wooden sign. To me, that sound was a confirmation. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm the one who opens the door. On the morning of the 30th day, I woke before the sun. Dawn spread honey-colored light across the lake. On the table lay an email from Attorney Mercer, short and final. Mrs. Whitfield, the 30-day period has ended. No claims, no response from Aubrey or her representative. The file is officially closed. I read each word slowly to be sure I hadn't misread. A long chapter full of smoke, tears, and tug-of-war had truly ended. No door knock, no courtroom, no last showdown. Aubrey's silence was the clearest confirmation. She knew she'd lost and had nowhere to return to. I breathed deep, sipped my coffee, and felt my heart steady for the first time in months. At noon, Caleb came home. He stood at the door with an envelope, his eyes relieved but tinged with shame. "Mercer sent a copy to me too," he said. "It's really over, Mom." I nodded. "The legal part is over, but what about your part?" Caleb looked up. In his eyes there was no defensiveness, no suspicion, only genuine remorse. He walked closer and set the envelope on the table. "I'm sorry, Mom, for letting someone make me doubt you, for staying quiet when you needed me most." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to apologize for being fooled. Everyone misses the light sometimes until the darkness passes." He nodded slightly and took a breath. "I've started seeing a therapist, Mom, not just to forget, but to learn not to repeat things. I want you to trust me again." "No promises needed," I smiled. "Just live decently." "That's enough." 2 days later, the local paper buzzed with news. Graham Pierce, the man in the dark suit with steel-cold eyes, was under investigation for financial fraud and investment scams. Accounts frozen, company charged. The article didn't mention Aubrey, only a vague note. "A young woman previously seen with Pierce in Lakewood is currently unaccounted for." I folded the paper. Not happy, not bitter. Just the sense of a circle closing. Maybe somewhere Aubrey chose to fall into the hole she dug herself. That afternoon I went down to the storage room. The boxes labeled "Property of Aubrey Whitfield" sat in the corner, dusty. I took a marker, crossed out her name, and added, "Unclaimed items." I locked the storage door, slid in a new lock, and listened to the clean click, the crisp sound of a sealed past. The next month, my Lakewood house ran a rotation for temporary guests. I set clear rules. Each person could stay up to 30 days, respect the shared spaces, and, if possible, contribute one weekend dinner for everyone to share. I called it the Dinner Fund. One Friday night, there were 5 of us around the table, me, Caleb, Janelle back for a visit, Mariah and little Ollie, and a new young woman named Trina just out of the center. The room smelled like roast chicken and garlic bread, and soft laughter rolled around the dining room. When Caleb raised his glass, I caught his gaze, the look of a man who'd been lost and was finding his way back to a real family. He said, "Mom, you turned this house into something I didn't expect, not just a home, but a place that saves people." I said, "Not saving people, son. I'm just opening the door so they can save themselves." That night, I sat alone in the living room. On the wall, the family photo hung straight, and the lamplight on Edris's face made it seem like he was smiling. Below it was a new lock, small, but more meaningful than any deed. I took back this house, but not with hatred. I took it back with light, patience, and faith that truth finds its way home. I opened my journal and wrote the final line of this journey. I wasn't driven out of my house. I drove the darkness out of mine. I closed the book and listened to the soft whisper of pages settling like agreement. That night, I sat on the porch looking at the lake. The breeze was cool, the water rippled, moonlight shimmered across the surface. Off in the distance, my house, the one that had been taken, lied about, and strangled, now glowed a steady, gentle gold, not blinding but warm and enduring. Caleb stepped out and draped a sweater over my shoulders. "Mom, I think people need to hear this story," he said. I smiled. "Those who need it will hear it, son. And those who aren't ready one day, when they're brave enough to open a door, they'll understand." When the wind moved through the willows, I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet sounds around me. No more strange footsteps, no more manipulative voices, no more fear of being pushed out of my own life, only the light of a real home where people are allowed to breathe and to begin again. I lifted my head to the Lakewood sky, where the stars blinked patiently, reminding me that darkness never wins forever. I smiled a calm smile, light as the lake breeze. Thank you for walking with me to the last page of this story. If you've been through something like this, if your home ever had corners you were afraid to enter because someone made you feel that way, tell me in the comments. I read every line and am grateful for every share, because each true story is a small lamp in the night. Where are you from, Lakewood, Houston, Toronto, or across the ocean? Let me know so this little channel home can feel a bit closer to you. And if this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so every time I open the door to tell more, you'll always have a seat in the front row. Thank you for helping keep the light in this house from ever going out.